The Arizona sun hung low over the ranch, painting everything the color of rust and regret. Marcus Donovan sat motionless on the porch, weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug gone cold hours ago. 65 years had carved deep lines around his eyes, each one a roadmap of battles fought and brothers buried. The gray in his beard caught the light like silver wire, and his shoulders, once broad enough to carry the weight of 70 men, now curved slightly forward under decades of invisible loads. Beside him, his grandson Ethan perched on the railing, 18 years old and burning with the same fire Marcus remembered from his own youth. The kid wore his hair high and tight, Marine recruiting papers folded in his back pocket like a loaded weapon. He'd been quiet for the better part of an hour, watching the old man stare at nothing, waiting for something neither of them could name. The desert stretched endlessly before them, heat waves dancing over scrub brush and ancient rock formations that had witnessed more history than any living man could claim. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled, patient and purposeful. Marcus tracked its flight with eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. Ethan finally broke the silence, his voice carrying the particular kind of respect young men reserve for old warriors who've earned every scar. "Grandpa, why do they call you the last wolf?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He set the cold coffee aside and pulled a cigarette from the pack in his shirt pocket, lighting it with practiced economy of motion. The smoke curled upward, dissipating into the vast empty sky when he spoke. His voice carried the gravel of 1,000 miles of highway and 100 firefights survived. "That's a long story, son. You got time?" Ethan shifted his weight, settling in. "I've got all the time you need." The old man smiled just barely at the corner of his mouth. It was the kind of smile that knew things, that had paid prices younger men couldn't imagine. "All right then, but this isn't some glory story. This is about what happens when you build something worth dying for, and then have to prove you meant it. This is about the last ride that changed everything." He drew on the cigarette, held the smoke, released it slowly. "Let me tell you about 17 years ago, when I was 48 years old and still believed I could save everyone." The desert shimmered, time folded, and the past rose up like heat off pavement. 17 years earlier, Marcus Donovan woke at 430 hours to the sound of screaming. Not real screaming, the kind that only echoed inside his skull, residue from a war that ended 4 decades ago, but never really left. Quezon, 1968. Mortar fire. His best friend Rodriguez blown apart 3 feet away, painting Marcus's face with blood and bone fragments. The screaming came from Marcus's own throat, back then, watching his brother Dynasty in the red mud of Vietnam. Now, at 48, he jolted upright in the darkness of his bedroom, heart hammering against ribs that remembered the concussion of artillery. Sweat soaked through the sheets. His hands shook, always shook after the dreams, and he pressed them flat against his thighs until the trembling subsided. This was the price. Every man who'd seen combat paid it, one nightmare at a time. He rose without turning on lights, navigating his small ranch house by memory and moonlight filtering through half-drawn blinds. The floorboards creaked under his weight, 200 pounds that used to be pure muscle but now carried the softness of middle age around the middle. His knees protested climbing out of bed, legacy of jumping out of too many helicopters and crashing too many motorcycles. Getting old was a privilege denied to too many brothers, so he swallowed the pain and kept moving. In the bathroom, he studied his reflection in the mirror above the sink. 48 looked back at him with hard eyes and a harder set to the jaw. Silver threaded through his dark hair and beard, more every year. Scars traced patterns across his chest and arms. Bullet wounds, knife cuts, road rash from a crash outside Tucson in '89 that should have killed him. His body was a war journal written in scar tissue and ache. He turned on the shower, letting cold water shock his system fully awake. The nightmares came less frequently now than they had in his 30s, but they never truly stopped. That was the bargain. You carried your dead with you, or you forgot them, and forgetting was its own kind of death. So Marcus carried Rodriguez, and Martinez, and Kowalski, and all the others whose names were carved into the black wall in D.C. He carried them in the shake of his hands, in the dreams that wouldn't let him sleep past 0430. The shower helped. Cold water always did. It grounded him in present reality, reminded him that Vietnam was 40 years gone and he'd survived to fight different battles on different ground. By the time he stepped out and toweled off, the shaking had stopped and his breathing had evened out. Control reasserted. The warrior's discipline never left, even when everything else did. He dressed in the dim pre-dawn light, jeans worn soft from 1,000 rides, black t-shirt, heavy boots with steel toes. His leather cut hung on the back of a chair, and he pulled it on with the reverence some men reserve for church robes. The Hell's Angel Desert chapter patch across the back wasn't just decoration. It was identity, brotherhood. The family he'd built after war destroyed his faith in everything except the men who fought beside him. The president patch sat heavy on his chest, embroidered letters that spelled out authority and responsibility in equal measure. Beneath it, rows of smaller patches told the story of 3 decades in the club. Founding member 1975, 25-year rocker, sergeant-at-arms before he took the president's chair. Each patch earned through blood or loyalty or both. In the kitchen, he started coffee, black, strong enough to strip paint, and stood at the window watching the desert come alive with first light. His property stretched 20 acres into nowhere, buffers between him and civilization. Out here, you could hear engines coming from miles away, see headlights breaking the horizon long before they arrived. Tactical advantage, even in peacetime. Old habits from old wars. His gaze drifted to the photographs arranged on the windowsill above the sink. Kate smiled at him from a frame, frozen at 35, the year before cancer took her. 6 years gone now, and the ache had dulled to constant low-grade pain instead of the sharp agony that had nearly destroyed him. Beside her photo stood another, his son Danny in marine dress blues, standing tall and proud, 21 years old and shipping out to his first deployment. That photo was older now. Danny had just made captain, career military like his old man, currently somewhere in Afghanistan, commanding a rifle company. The third photograph showed Danny's wife Rachel holding their infant son, Ethan. Marcus studied that picture longest, the way he did every morning. Rachel's smile carried warmth that reminded him of Kate, and the baby in her arms represented something Marcus thought he'd lost. Hope, future, legacy beyond blood and brotherhood. Danny had asked one thing before deploying 12 months ago. Dad, watch over them. Keep them safe until I get home. Marcus had given his word, and a man's word was everything. So every morning he studied that photograph and renewed his promise. No harm would come to his son's family. Not while Marcus Donovan still drew breath. The coffee finished brewing, and he poured a cup, drinking it standing at the counter. No sugar, no cream. Pure and bitter, the way his grandfather had taught him a real man took his coffee. Outside, the sky shifted from black to deep purple to the pale blue of early summer. Heat would come later, punishing and relentless, but right now, the desert held almost comfortable temperatures. Good riding weather. His phone buzzed on the counter, text from Jake Chen, his vice president and closest brother in the club. Meeting at 0800, full patch, mandatory. We got problems. Marcus's jaw tightened. Jake didn't call mandatory meetings for small issues. Something had gone wrong, and given recent concerns about Derek Nash, Marcus had a sick feeling he knew what those problems involved. He typed back with 2 thumbs. Copy, I'll be there. He finished his coffee, rinsed the cup, and checked his watch. 0545. 2 hours before the meeting, plenty of time to ride out to Rachel's place and make sure she and the baby were safe. He'd been doing morning check-ins since Danny left. Unofficial welfare visits disguised as friendly stops. Rachel never complained, seemed to appreciate having someone who understood what it meant to wait for a Marine to come home from war. Marcus grabbed his keys and walked out to the garage where his Harley waited. 1996 Fat Boy, maintained with Marine Corps precision, more reliable than any woman and twice as loyal. He ran his hand over the fuel tank, checking for the 100th time that everything sat exactly where it should. The bike was an extension of himself now, after 40 years of riding. He knew every sound it made, every vibration, could diagnose problems by feel alone. He threw his leg over the saddle, settled his weight, turned the key. The engine roared to life with a sound that cleared the last cobwebs of nightmare from his head. This was meditation. This was prayer. This was freedom contained in chrome and leather, and the open road stretching forever in every direction. He kicked off the stand, rolled out of the garage, and pointed the fat boy toward the sunrise. The highway unspooled before him, empty at this hour except for long-haul truckers and shift workers heading home. Marcus kept the throttle steady at 70, feeling the wind tear at his beard and pull at his cut. Desert landscape blurred past on both sides, sagebrush and Joshua trees and rock formations that had stood here when his great-grandfather first crossed this territory. There was something eternal about this land, something that made a man's problems feel temporary and small against the weight of geological time. But his problems weren't small, and they weren't temporary. Derek Nash had been spiraling for months, and Marcus had let it happen because you didn't give up on brothers. Derek was former Marine Corps, Iraq War veteran with 2 Purple Hearts and enough demons to fill hell twice over. Marcus had recruited him into the club 8 years ago, seen potential beneath the PTSD and the pain, had sponsored him, mentored him, treated him like the son he'd wanted before Danny came along. Watching Derek fall had been like watching his sister Emma die all over again. Slow-motion tragedy you saw coming but couldn't stop, no matter how hard you tried. Emma had married the wrong man, hidden the abuse, refused help until it was too late. By the time Marcus understood what was happening, she was in a coma at University Medical Center with skull fractures and internal bleeding. She died 3 days later without regaining consciousness, and her husband Ryan got 20 years in a plea deal that felt like murder itself. Marcus had founded the Shield Sisters Network the day after Emma's funeral, using club resources and connections to build something that could save women law enforcement failed to protect. 10 years of operations, hundreds of women rescued, dozens of safe houses across the Southwest. It was Emma's legacy and his penance rolled into one. But Derek was threatening all of it. His drug use, his increasingly erratic behavior, his obsession with Rachel that had started subtle and grown dangerous. Marcus had been making excuses for him, extending chances, trying to pull him back from the edge the way no one had pulled Emma back. Classic mistake, confusing loyalty with enabling, love with blindness. The turnoff to Rachel's subdivision appeared on the right, and Marcus downshifted, rolling through streets lined with tract houses and 2-car garages. This was suburbia, the American dream reduced to HOA regulations and identical floor plans. Danny had bought the place before deploying, wanting his family safe and stable while he was overseas. Good schools, low crime, the kind of neighborhood where people mowed their lawns on Saturday and went to church on Sunday. Marcus's Harley rumbled between the houses like a dragon in a petting zoo, drawing stares from early morning joggers and dog walkers. He caught their looks, mixture of fear and fascination, the eternal civilian response to bikers. They couldn't decide if he was dangerous or romantic, outlaw or freedom fighter. He was both and neither, but they'd never understand that. Rachel's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, single-story ranch with desert landscaping and a flagpole in the front yard. The American flag hung limp in the still morning air, and Danny's Kawasaki sat under a cover in the driveway, waiting for its owner to return. Marcus pulled up to the curb and killed his engine, sudden silence rushing in to fill the space where noise had been. He was halfway to the front door when he noticed Derek's bike parked around the side of the house, partially hidden by Rachel's Honda Accord. Ice flooded Marcus's veins, cold and sharp and instantly clarifying. Derek shouldn't be here, had no reason to be here, had been specifically told to stay away after the incident 2 weeks ago when he'd shown up drunk at midnight, pounding on Rachel's door and demanding to see her. Marcus's training kicked in automatically. Tactical assessment, threat evaluation, response planning. He moved to the front door with the economy of motion learned in rice paddies and urban warfare, every sense heightened. His hand went to the small of his back where he kept a Glock 19, not drawing but ready. The door stood slightly ajar, morning breeze pushing it open another inch as he approached. Through the gap, he heard voices, Derek's, raised and agitated, and Rachel's, trying to stay calm. Marcus eased the door open and stepped inside without announcing himself, slipping into the shadows of the entrance hallway. Military habits died hard. Sometimes they kept you alive. The living room lay ahead, visible through an archway. Rachel sat on the couch with 2-year-old Ethan beside her, the baby clutching a stuffed dinosaur and staring at Derek with wide, frightened eyes. Derek paced in front of them, hands gesturing wildly as he talked. He'd lost weight since Marcus last saw him, gaunt now, cheekbones sharp beneath skin gone gray. His eyes had that hollow look addicts got, pupils too large and movements too jerky. Not just using heavy. Derek's voice carried desperation Marcus recognized from too many brothers who'd gone down this road. I'm just saying, Danny asked me to check on you, that's all, just checking. Rachel held Ethan closer, protective instinct overwhelming whatever politeness she might have shown. Derek, it's 5 in the morning, Marcus checks on us. We're fine, you need to leave. Derek spun to face her, and Marcus saw the flash of rage cross his features before he controlled it. This was bad. This was worse than Marcus had feared. Derek was past rational thought, past the point where words could reach him. He was a man drowning and ready to pull everyone down with him. Marcus stepped out of the shadows, his voice carrying the flat command of a DI addressing recruits who'd fucked up. Derek whirled, hand dropping instinctively to the knife on his belt before recognition registered. For a moment, just a heartbeat, Marcus saw murder in those eyes. Then Derek forced a smile that didn't reach anywhere near genuine. Wolf, hey brother, Marcus cut him off with a gesture, turning to Rachel. Take Ethan upstairs. Rachel moved immediately, scooping up the baby and disappearing toward the staircase. Marcus waited until he heard her bedroom door close before addressing Derek again. The silence between them stretched thin and dangerous. Derek tried again. Look, I know what you're thinking, but... Marcus raised one hand and Derek fell silent. The command structure held barely. Marcus moved to the couch Derek had been looming over and sat down, deliberately casual, projecting the calm of a man in complete control. It was performance, but he'd been performing control for 40 years. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. Derek hesitated, then complied, perching on the edge of the seat like he might bolt at any second. His leg bounced nervous energy, and his hands kept moving, picking at his jeans, rubbing his face, never still. Classic signs. Marcus had seen them before in Vietnam, in Iraq through stories his son brought home, in club brothers who'd fallen into the darkness. Marcus leaned back, projecting patience he didn't feel. Talk to me. What's really going on? Derek's face crumpled, and for a moment the warrior veneer cracked to show the broken man underneath. I can't sleep, Wolf. I try. But every time I close my eyes, I'm back there. Fallujah, the house-to-house fighting, the kids who got caught in the crossfire. I see their faces, and His voice broke. Marcus knew this territory intimately. What are you taking? Derek's eyes flickered away. Just some pills, to help me sleep, nothing major. Marcus's tone hardened. Don't bullshit me. I can see it on you. What are you taking? Silence stretched between them, heavy with years of brotherhood and the slow death of trust. Finally, Derek's shoulders sagged. OxyContin. Started after I fucked up my back last year. Got a prescription, then the prescription ran out, but I couldn't stop. Found other sources. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of failure settle onto his shoulders. He should have seen this sooner, should have intervened before it got this deep. Emma's death had taught him what happened when you waited too long, but apparently he hadn't learned the lesson well enough. How much? Derek laughed, bitter and broken. Enough that I need more every day just to feel normal. Enough that I'm buying from the same cartel scum we're supposed to be keeping out of our territory. Enough that I'm... He stopped, caught himself. Marcus leaned forward, voice dropping to the dangerous quiet men who'd served learned to fear. Enough that what, Derek? The younger man looked up, defiance flaring in those hollowed eyes. Enough that I've had to make deals, trade information for supply, help them move product through routes we control. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Marcus felt something inside him go cold and hard, the part that had survived Vietnam and 20 years of outlaw life by being willing to do what needed doing. Derek hadn't just betrayed himself. He'd betrayed the club, betrayed the brotherhood, put every single one of his 70 brothers at risk. Marcus stood slowly and Derek flinched. Good. He should flinch. Marcus's voice came out measured and level, which somehow made it more terrifying. How long? Derek's defiance crumbled. 6 months, maybe 7. Wolf, I didn't have a choice. I needed... Marcus raised one hand, silencing them. You always have a choice. You chose wrong, repeatedly. Derek surged to his feet, anger replacing fear. You don't understand what it's like. The nightmares, the flashbacks, the feeling like you're drowning every fucking second of every fucking day. I needed something to make it stop. Marcus met his eyes with the flat stare of a man who'd stared down worse. I wake up screaming about Vietnam 3 times a week. I see Rodriguez's face blown apart every time I close my eyes. I carry 27 dead brothers with me every day. You think you're the only one who's drowning? The raw honesty of it seemed to shock Derek into silence. Marcus pressed forward, driving the point home. Difference between you and me? I found purpose bigger than my pain. I protect people. I built something that matters. I give my demons direction. You fed yours until they ate you alive. Derek's face twisted. Must be nice having all the answers, being the perfect warrior who never breaks. Marcus shook his head slowly. I've broken plenty, but I broke towards something, not away from everything. And I sure as hell didn't betray my brothers to drug dealers. He paused, letting that sink in. You come near Rachel again without my permission. We're going to have a different kind of conversation. Understood? Derek stared at him for a long moment, something ugly moving behind his eyes. Then he nodded just once and moved toward the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back. You know what your problem is, Wolf? You think you can save everyone. But some of us don't want to be saved. Some of us just want to burn. He walked out before Marcus could respond, and moments later his motorcycle roared to life and faded into the distance. Marcus stood in Rachel's living room, feeling every one of his 48 years pressing down on him like physical weight. This wasn't over. It was barely beginning. Rachel appeared at the top of the stairs, still holding Ethan. Is he gone? Marcus nodded. He's gone, but he'll be back. They always come back. She descended the stairs carefully, and Marcus saw the fear she'd been hiding while Derek was present. Her hands shook slightly as she set Ethan down, and the baby immediately wrapped his arms around her leg, seeking comfort. Marcus, I'm scared. The way he looks at me, it's not right. It's like he thinks I belong to him or something. Marcus had seen that look before on Ryan's face in the weeks before he killed Emma. Obsession masked as love, possession masked as protection. It was a look that meant violence was coming, just a question of when. I need you to be honest with me. Has he tried anything? Touched you? Threatened you? Anything at all? Rachel shook her head, but her body language told a different story. Arms crossed protectively, weight shifted away from the door. Not directly, but he sends text. Shows up at random times, tells me Danny asked him to watch over us. But when I called Danny last week, he didn't know what I was talking about. Said he never asked Derek to do anything. Rage flickered through Marcus's chest, hot and immediate. Derek was stalking his son's wife, lying about it, using Danny's deployment as cover. This had crossed every line this club held sacred. I'm going to handle this, today. But until I do, I need you to promise me something. Rachel met his eyes, and he saw steel underneath the fear. Good. She'd need that. Anything. Marcus pulled a card from his wallet, plain white, single phone number printed in black. This goes to Diana Cross. She runs Shield Sisters, the women's protection network I founded. You call that number anytime, day or night, someone answers. You tell them Wolf sent you, and they'll move heaven and earth to keep you safe. Understand? Rachel took the card with steady hands. You think it's going to get that bad? Marcus wished he could tell her no, could reassure her that Derek would back off and everything would be fine. But he'd learned the hard way that false comfort killed. I think Derek's sick and desperate, which makes him dangerous and unpredictable. I'm going to do everything in my power to fix this situation without it escalating. But if I can't, he let the sentence hang, unfinished. Rachel tucked the card into her pocket. Danny trusted you to protect us. I trust you too. The weight of that trust settled onto Marcus's shoulders, joining all the other responsibilities he carried. He looked at Ethan, who'd abandoned his mother's leg to toddle over and stare up at Marcus with wide, curious eyes. The baby reached up with both arms, universal child language for pick me up. Marcus bent down and scooped his grandson into his arms, feeling the solid weight of 2 years of life and infinite potential. Ethan grabbed Marcus's beard, tugging experimentally, and laughed when Marcus made a mock pained face. This was why. This innocent joy, this unburdened future, this chance to get things right that he'd failed to get right with Emma. This was what made all the scars and nightmares worthwhile. He held Ethan close and made the same promise he'd made to Danny, silently this time, but no less binding. No harm would come to this child. Whatever it took, whatever price had to be paid, Marcus would keep his family safe. That was the code. That was everything. After making sure Rachel had his number, Diana's number, and Jake's number programmed into her phone on speed dial, Marcus reluctantly left. The morning had grown hot while he was inside, Arizona sun climbing toward its brutal zenith. He checked his watch. 07:15, 45 minutes until the club meeting. Just enough time to ride back, shower off the tension, and prepare for whatever shitstorm was about to hit. The highway called to him and he answered, opening the throttle and letting speed blur the world into simple forward motion. Wind ripped at him, hot and dry, carrying the smell of creosote and sage. He pushed the fat boy harder than he probably should have, touching 90 on straightaways, leaning into curves with decades of muscle memory guiding him. This was therapy better than anything a VA shrink could offer. Velocity and vibration and the constant threat of death if you fucked up even slightly. By the time he pulled into the clubhouse parking lot, he'd burned off enough adrenaline to think clearly. The lot was already half full. Bikes lined up in neat rows, a mix of Harleys and Customs, each one representing a brother who'd answered Jake's mandatory call. Marcus counted them automatically. 43 bikes, meaning 43 members present with more arriving every minute. Whatever Jake needed to discuss, it was big enough that brothers were canceling work, rearranging schedules, driving in from satellite chapters across the state. The clubhouse itself had started life as a warehouse before the club purchased it in 1982, converting it into fortress and home. Concrete block construction, reinforced doors, security cameras covering every approach. Inside, meeting room, bar, kitchen, chapel for private prayers, and barracks where brothers could crash when they needed sanctuary. The walls were covered with photographs spanning 4 decades, founding members in their 20s, fresh from Vietnam, and looking for new wars to fight. Annual runs, funerals for fallen brothers, charity events where grim-faced bikers handed oversized checks to children's hospitals. Marcus dismounted and pulled off his sunglasses, surveying the gathered bikes. He recognized most by sight: Luis Rodriguez's custom chopper, with the Virgin Mary airbrushed on the tank, Tommy McKenna's blacked-out Dina, Cole Washington's vintage shovelhead that he'd rebuilt from frame-up. Each bike told a story about its owner, and Marcus knew every story by heart. Jake's Sportster sat near the door, which meant the VP was already inside coordinating. Jake had been Marcus's right hand for 8 years now, recruited from the Army Rangers after his discharge. The kid, though at 42 he wasn't really a kid anymore, had leadership potential Marcus recognized because he'd seen it in the mirror 30 years ago. Strong, smart, loyal to the bone, with just enough edge to make hard decisions when compassion would get you killed. Marcus pushed through the front door into blessed, air-conditioned cool. The main room opened before him, brothers clustered in small groups, voices low and serious. Conversation stopped when he entered, heads turning toward their president. Marcus read the mood instantly. Fear, anger, confusion, the dangerous cocktail that preceded bad decisions and worse outcomes. He needed to take control before things spiraled. He jerked his chin toward the meeting room, and brothers began filing in without needing verbal orders. This was the command structure they'd built over decades, military precision applied to outlaw life. By the time Marcus reached the meeting table, every chair was filled and latecomers lined the walls, standing room only. 70 men, give or take, all wearing the same patch, all bound by the same code. Marcus remained standing at the head of the table, letting silence build until it pressed against the walls. Then he looked at Jake. Report. Jake stood, opened a folder, and began laying out photographs on the table. Security camera stills, blown up to 8 by 10 glossies. Marcus leaned forward, studying them. The images showed Derek meeting with men Marcus recognized from intelligence files. Sonora cartel members, mid-level operators who control drug trafficking routes through Arizona and New Mexico. Jake's voice carried no emotion, just facts delivered with military efficiency. These were taken over the past 4 months at various locations. We've confirmed 12 separate meetings between Derek and cartel representatives. Financial analysis shows unusual deposits into an account we trace back to him, $73,000 over 6 months. Cole Washington spoke up from his seat halfway down the table, his deep voice carrying the weight of 20 years as sergeant-at-arms. That's not all. I've been tracking club resources, vehicles, safe houses, supply routes. Someone's been feeding information to outside parties. The cartel's been avoiding our protection rackets, hitting spots we don't cover, moving product through gaps in our territory. That doesn't happen by accident. Luis Rodriguez added his piece, sliding a ledger across the table toward Marcus. The money matches up. Every time we lost a revenue stream, Derek's account got a deposit. He's been selling us out for drug money. The room erupted in angry voices, brothers shouting over each other, calling for Derek's head, demanding immediate action. Marcus let it go on for exactly 15 seconds, then slammed his palm flat on the table. The sharp crack of flesh on wood cut through the noise like a gunshot, and silence crashed back down. Marcus's gaze swept the room, meeting each man's eyes in turn. We're not a mob. We're a brotherhood. We follow the code, which means Derek gets due process before we do anything. He turned back to Jake. Have you confronted him? Jake shook his head. Wanted to bring it to you first. But Wolf, there's more. Diana called me this morning. 3 women from Shield Sisters' safe houses have been compromised. Someone leaked their locations. 2 women are missing, presumed taken by their abusers or sold to traffickers. One woman, Yesenia Fuentes, 23, fled her cartel boyfriend 6 months ago, was found dead yesterday in a dumpster behind a truck stop in Nogales. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Shield Sisters was sacred, the one thing every brother held above even club business. It was Emma's legacy, the good they did to balance the gray area of their other operations. Anyone who betrayed Shield Sisters betrayed everything the club stood for. Marcus forced his voice to stay level, though fury burned in his chest. You have proof Derek leaked those locations? Luis spoke up again. Only 5 people knew where Yesenia was staying. You, me, Diana, Jake, and Derek. Derek's the only one with motivation and opportunity. Plus, his phone records show calls to a number we've linked to Yesenia's ex-boyfriend 3 days before she was found. Tommy McKenna, the road captain who planned all their runs, added his observation. Derek's been acting erratic for months, Wolf. Missing runs, showing up high, picking fights with prospects. We've all seen it getting worse, but we kept hoping. He stopped, shaking his head. Marcus knew what Tommy meant. They'd all been hoping Derek would pull himself out of the spiral, would choose brotherhood over addiction, would remember who he was before the pills took over. Hope was a luxury they could no longer afford. Jake placed one more photograph on the table, and Marcus's blood turned to ice. The image showed Derek's bike parked outside Rachel's house, timestamped from this morning at 5:20 hours, 5 minutes before Marcus arrived. Jake's voice held barely controlled rage. He's been to your daughter-in-law's house 6 times in the past 2 weeks, Wolf. Always early morning or late night. Always when you're not there. The room went dead silent. Every brother in the club knew the code. You protected family, especially women and children, especially the families of deployed service members. Derek had violated that code repeatedly, deliberately, while lying about it to Marcus's face. There was no coming back from this. Marcus straightened to his full height, and when he spoke, his voice carried the absolute authority of a man who'd led warriors through hell. Protocol says we vote on removing a member's patch. But Derek's crimes go beyond club politics. He's endangered innocents, betrayed our sisters, Stalked my son's wife. This is personal, and I'm handling it personally. Cole stood. Wolf, you know we support you, but protocol exists for a reason. We vote, we make this official. We show the world we did this by the book. Jake cut in. With respect to Cole, we don't have time for a vote. Rachel's in danger now, not after we spend 3 days deliberating. Derek's unpredictable and armed. We need to move. The room divided immediately, half the brothers nodding agreement with Jake, half supporting Cole's call for a procedure. Marcus saw the club fracturing in real time, saw decades of unity threatening to splinter over Derek's betrayal. This was how brotherhoods died. Not from external threats, but from internal divisions over how to handle traitors in their midst. Marcus raised his hand, and both sides fell silent. We do this my way. I'm giving Derek 72 hours to surrender himself, confess everything, and enter rehab. If he does that, we strip his patch, but we don't kill. If he runs or refuses, Marcus let the sentence hang incomplete, but every man in the room understood what came next. Jake shook his head. 72 hours is too long. Rachel's vulnerable right now. Diana's safe houses are exposed. We need action today. Marcus met his VP's eyes, and for the first time in their 8 years together, they stood on opposite sides of a decision. 48 hours then, I'll bring him in myself. Cole stood again, and his voice carried the gravity of a man who'd seen too many brothers die from bad decisions. This is a mistake, Wolf. Derek's past saving. Every hour we wait is another hour he can run, or hurt someone, or get one of us killed. Protocol says we vote. Let's vote. The challenge hung in the air, and Marcus felt the weight of 70 pairs of eyes on him. Cole was right about protocol. Jake was right about danger. But Marcus had made Derek a promise years ago when he sponsored him into the club. Brothers didn't abandon brothers until every option was exhausted. He couldn't let Derek go without trying one last time to pull him back from the abyss. Marcus's voice came out harder than he intended. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you what's happening. 48 hours. I find Derek, I bring him in. We settle this as men. Anyone got a problem with that? The room held its collective breath. This was the moment where loyalty met disagreement, where brotherhood tested itself against the limits of authority. Marcus knew if too many brothers challenged him, he'd have to call the vote, or risk losing the respect that held the club together. Democracy within hierarchy, the delicate balance that kept motorcycle clubs from becoming dictatorships or anarchies. Cole was the first to sit down, nodding slowly. 48 hours. But Wolf, if he's not in custody by then, we do this the hard way. Agreed? Marcus met his sergeant-at-arms' eyes and saw both support and warning there. Agreed. One by one, the other brothers settled, some reluctantly, but all ultimately deferring to their president's judgment. Jake remained standing a moment longer, jaw tight with frustration, before finally nodding and sitting down. Crisis averted, unity preserved. But barely. Marcus addressed the room. Luis, I want eyes on Derek. Track his phone, his bike, his known associates. Don't engage, just report. Cole, double security at all Shield Sisters locations. No one in or out without clearance from Diana or me. Tommy, prep a road crew, 20 bikes minimum, full kit, ready to roll on my signal. Jake, he paused, softening his tone. I need you to coordinate everything while I'm hunting Derek. Can you do that? Jake's expression remained tight, but he nodded. Yes, sir. Marcus hated the formality of sir, hated the distance it created, but right now they needed chain of command more than they needed friendship. Good. Everyone else, business as usual. We're not in crisis mode yet. We're in preparation mode. Stay sharp, stay ready, but don't let anyone outside these walls know we're having internal problems. To the world, we're united and unshakable. Questions? Silence answered him. Good. He'd held the club together despite disagreement, maintained authority despite challenge. But the cost of that authority was measured in the fear he saw on every brother's face. Fear that Derek's fall would take others down with him, that the family they'd built could crack from the inside out. The meeting broke up with none of the usual camaraderie, brothers filing out in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. Marcus remained at the table studying the photographs of Derek's betrayal spread before him like autopsy reports of their brotherhood's death. How had he missed this? How had he let it get this far? Jake approached after the room cleared, and his voice carried exhaustion Marcus recognized from looking in mirrors. Wolf, I'm not questioning your authority, but I need you to understand, Rachel's my sister. Blood sister, if something happens to her because we waited 48 hours. Marcus's head snapped up. Your sister? Jake nodded and suddenly pieces clicked into place. Chen. Jake Chen. Marcus had known Jake's family had history in the community, but had never connected it to Rachel Hayes. Rachel Chen before she married Danny. The VP wasn't just worried about a brother's wife. He was worried about his actual sibling. Marcus stood, moving around the table to grip Jake's shoulder. Why didn't you tell me? Jake's expression held guilt and defiance mixed. Because I didn't want special treatment. Didn't want you to think I couldn't be objective about club business. But when Derek started stalking her, his voice cracked slightly. She's my baby sister, Wolf. Only family I have left after our parents died. I can't lose her. Everything shifted. Jake's push for immediate action wasn't just tactical. It was personal, visceral, the same protective rage Marcus felt toward Danny. He pulled Jake into a brief, hard hug, the kind warriors gave each other when words weren't enough. I'll bring Derek in. One way or another, your sister's safe by sunset tomorrow. That's my word. Jake nodded against his shoulder, then pulled back, wiping his eyes roughly. I trust you, old man. Just don't make me regret it. Marcus managed a grim smile. When have my plans ever gone sideways? Jake actually laughed, dark and short. You want that list chronologically or by body count? The moment of levity helped, breaking some of the tension that had been strangling them both. But underneath the brief humor lay cold reality. In 48 hours, Derek Nash would either be in custody or in the ground. There was no third option. Not anymore. The code was clear, and Marcus had helped write it. Betrayers died, no exceptions. His phone vibrated in his pocket, unknown number. Marcus answered automatically. Yeah. Sobbing on the other end, gasping breaths, and then Rachel's voice, barely recognizable through panic. Marcus, he took me. Derek took me. We're in his truck, and he's driving, and he won't tell me where we're going, and Ethan's crying, and I don't... The line went dead. Marcus's world narrowed to a single point of focus, every other concern burning away in the white heat of immediate crisis. He was moving before conscious thought caught up, Jake matching his stride as they burst out of the clubhouse into the brutal midday sun. Marcus's voice came out flat and cold, the tone he'd used in Vietnam when ordering men into situations they might not survive. Code Red, Derek has Rachel and Ethan. Full mobilization now, Ristim. Jake was already on his radio barking orders. All units respond. Priority Alpha. Hostage situation. The shield is active. Within 90 seconds, 43 bikes roared to life in perfect synchronization. Within 3 minutes, the entire chapter was rolling out of the parking lot in formation. A river of chrome and leather and focused violence headed toward an enemy who'd made the fatal mistake of threatening their family. Marcus led the pack, throttle wide open, wind screaming past his helmet. His mind raced through tactical scenarios, possibilities, contingencies. Derek was trained, dangerous, unpredictable. But he was also a drug addict acting on impulse, and impulsive men made mistakes. Marcus just needed to get to Rachel before Derek made a final, irreversible mistake. His phone rang through his helmet's Bluetooth. Luis. Wolf, got him. Derek's phone is pinging off towers heading east on Road 60. Current speed approximately 85. Estimate he's 40 minutes ahead of you. Marcus did the math. Derek had a head start, but the full weight of the Hells Angels was bearing down on him. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The question was whether Derek understood that or whether his drug-addled brain thought he could somehow escape consequences. Marcus keyed his mic. All units, Route 60 eastbound. Formation riding, maintain speed. Luis, coordinate with state police. I want roadblocks north and south. Nobody leaves this highway. Tommy, take half the pack and flank from the parallel county roads. Jake stays with me. Cole, call Diana and activate all Shield Sisters resources. If Derek makes it to any population center, I want eyes everywhere. Acknowledgements came back rapid fire, and the formation split smoothly, 20 bikes peeling off to follow Tommy on the flanking route, while the remaining 23 maintained pursuit on the main highway. This was military operation. Lessons from Vietnam and Iraq applied to domestic territory, overwhelming force brought to bear on a single target who'd violated the one unforgivable law: harming innocents. The desert flew past at 90 miles per hour, heat shimmers making the horizon waver like water. Marcus's hands were steady on the handlebars, his breathing controlled, but inside his chest, something ancient and terrible uncurled. This was the warrior he'd buried after Vietnam, the part of himself that could kill without hesitation when circumstances demanded it. He'd hoped never to release that particular demon again. Derek had left him no choice. Another call, this time from Diana. Marcus, I'm tracking Rachel's phone. She must have gotten it turned on before Derek noticed. GPS shows them stopped at mile marker 47, Rosie's Diner. That's Sophie's place. Marcus's memory supplied details. Sophie Chen, Jake's older sister, owner of a roadside diner the club occasionally used for meetings. She was survivor herself, pulled from a burning motel by Shield Sisters years ago when her abusive ex-husband hired mercenaries to track her down. If Rachel had made it to Sophie's diner, she'd chosen well. Sophie understood danger intimately. Marcus adjusted course, pushing the fat boy harder than he should have, coaxing 110 out of the engine on straightaways. The pack matched his speed, staying in formation, a rolling wall of brotherhood bearing down on their target with mathematical precision. Rosie's Diner appeared on the horizon, classic Route 66 architecture with chrome trim and neon signs. 3 vehicles in the parking lot: Derek's pickup truck, Sophie's Honda Accord, and a beat-up Chevy that probably belonged to a trucker or early lunch regular. Marcus held up his fist, and the formation slowed, splitting to surround the building from all sides. No escape routes, no blind spots. Textbook containment. They rolled to a stop 50 yards out, engines idling low, waiting for orders. Marcus killed his engine and dismounted, Jake beside him immediately. The silence felt heavy after hours of wind and road noise. Through the diner's front window, Marcus could see shapes moving inside. 3 people, maybe 4. No obvious violence, not yet. Jake's voice came low and urgent. How do you want to play this? Marcus studied the building, calculating angles and cover, exits and firing lines. The old warrior in him saw this as a tactical problem to be solved, but the man, the father, the brother, he saw his grandson inside that building, innocent and terrified, and knew any solution requiring violence near that child was no solution at all. His voice came out measured and calm, betraying none of the fury churning in his gut. We talk first. Derek's cornered, but he's not stupid. He knows he can't fight his way through 70 brothers. If he's got any sense left, he'll surrender Rachel and Ethan peacefully. Jake's expression said he doubted Derek had any sense left, but he nodded. And if he doesn't? Marcus didn't answer with words. He simply drew the Glock from the small of his back, checked the magazine, chambered around, and started walking toward the diner's front door. Behind him, he heard 22 other weapons being made ready. The message was clear. Derek could choose peace or violence, but either way, he was leaving here without his hostages. The diner door stood slightly ajar, and Marcus could hear voices inside. Derek's rising in pitch and desperation. Sophie's trying to stay calm. Rachel's pleading. And underneath it all, Ethan crying that particular wail toddlers made when the world stopped making sense. Marcus pushed the door open slowly, letting it swing wide to frame him in the doorway. Bright midday sun at his back cast his shadow long across the checkered linoleum floor. He stood there for a moment, letting Derek see him, letting the full weight of his presence sink in. Then he stepped inside, Jake flanking him to the right, both men's weapons held low but ready. The scene inside locked into Marcus's mind with crystal clarity. Rachel sat in a booth against the far wall, holding Ethan tight against her chest. The boy's face was red from crying, but he'd gone quiet now, sensing the change in atmosphere. Sophie stood behind the counter, hands visible and empty, but her posture suggested a weapon within reach. Smart woman. An older man, trucker, judging by his cap and weathered hands, sat frozen at the counter, coffee cup halfway to his mouth. And Derek stood in the center of the room, blocking the path to Rachel's booth. He'd pulled a knife, standard Marine K-bar, worn handle suggesting decades of use. His hand shook holding it, not from fear but from withdrawal symptoms racking his system. His eyes looked almost feral, cornered animal recognizing but not accepting its fate. When Derek spoke, his voice came out raw. "Wolf, this wasn't supposed to, I just needed." Marcus raised his free hand, palm out, universal gesture, forced stop. "Derek, brother, let's talk this through." Derek's laugh bordered on hysterical. "Talk? Like you talked this morning? You know what I saw in your eyes when you looked at me? Pity, disgust, like I was already dead and you were just waiting for the funeral." Marcus took one careful step forward, closing distance by inches. "You're sick. I've known that for months. Should have acted sooner, should have forced you into treatment. That's on me. But Derek, this right here," he gestured at Rachel and Ethan, "this isn't you. This isn't the brother I know. This is the drugs talking." Derek's grip on the knife tightened. "The drugs are the only thing keeping me sane. You don't understand, Wolf. You can't understand. I see them every night. The children we killed, the families we destroyed. All for what? For oil? For politicians? For nothing?" The anguish in Derek's voice was real, and Marcus recognized it because he carried the same ghosts. But ghost-haunted men didn't get to take hostages, didn't get to terrorize innocents, didn't get to justify present evil with past trauma. Marcus's voice softened just slightly. "I do understand. Rodriguez, Martinez, Kowalski. I carry them all. But I learned something in 40 years of surviving. Your pain doesn't give you permission to create more pain. Your trauma doesn't excuse traumatizing others. You choose every day whether to be victim or victimizer. You're choosing wrong." Derek shook his head violently. "She was supposed to save me. Rachel was supposed to fix everything. She looks like—" He stopped, something vulnerable and broken crossing his face. "She looks like my mother. Before my father killed her. Before I couldn't save her. And I thought if I could protect Rachel, if I could keep her safe, maybe it would mean I wasn't worthless. Maybe it would mean I could still be the hero instead of the monster." Understanding clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just obsession. It was transference, trauma projection, decades of unprocessed grief manifesting as stalking behavior. Derek didn't want Rachel as a woman. He wanted her as symbol, as stand-in for the mother he'd failed to protect as a child. It explained everything and excused nothing. Marcus took another step. "Your mother's death wasn't your fault, Derek. You were 9 years old. At dawn, 9-year-olds don't stop abusive fathers. But grown men choose better. They get help. They face their demons instead of feeding them. They don't punish innocent women for looking like someone they lost." Derek's eyes filled with tears. "I can't lose her. If I lose her, I've got nothing left. No club, no brothers, no purpose. Just the nightmares and the pills and the emptiness." Marcus heard the truth beneath the words. Derek was suicidal, had been for months. And this was elaborate suicide by cop scenario with Hell's Angels substituting for police. He was pushing for fatal confrontation because he lacked courage to end himself directly. Classic PTSD progression Marcus had seen in too many veterans over the years. But understanding Derek's psychology didn't change the tactical reality. Armed man, hostages, deteriorating situation. Marcus needed to de-escalate before somebody died, most likely Derek, but possibly Rachel or Ethan if Derek panicked. The knife was close enough to do lethal damage before anyone could stop him. Sophie chose that moment to speak, her voice carrying the particular authority of someone who'd survived similar trauma. "Derek, I'm going to bring you water. You're dehydrated, probably coming down, thinking's impaired. Just water, okay? No tricks." Derek's head snapped toward her, knife rising defensively. "Stay back." Sophie ignored him, moving slowly around the counter with a plastic cup and a pitcher. She walked toward Derek with the fearlessness of someone who'd already faced her worst nightmare and survived. You're not a monster. I know monsters. My ex-husband was a monster. You're just a sick man who needs help. But sick men don't hurt children. That's where the line is. She set the water on the nearest table and backed away, hands visible. Derek stared at it for a long moment, then lunged forward and grabbed the cup, drinking desperately. His guard dropped for just a second, knife lowering as he tilted his head back to drain the water. Jake moved with ranger training, crossing the distance in 2 silent strides, hitting Derek from the side with a perfect tackle that sent both men crashing into a table. The knife skittered across the floor. Marcus was moving before conscious thought, kicking the weapon away, covering Rachel and Ethan with his body in case Derek had a backup weapon. The fight lasted perhaps 5 seconds. Derek was trained but exhausted, malnourished, withdrawal weakened. Jake had him face down on the linoleum in a textbook restraint hold, Mai in the small of Derek's back, both arms secured. Derek didn't resist. He just sobbed, all the fight draining out of him like water from a cracked vessel. Marcus holstered his weapon and moved to Rachel's booth, checking her and Ethan for injuries. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? Rachel shook her head, clutching Ethan so tightly the boy squirmed. No, he grabbed me at the house, put us in his truck, kept saying he was saving us from something. He wasn't making sense. I managed to call you, then he took my phone, but he didn't hurt us. He kept saying he'd never hurt us. Relief flooded through Marcus, followed immediately by rage at what Derek had put them through. He turned to look at his fallen brother, now zip-tied and being hauled upright by Jake and 2 other bikers who'd entered during the confrontation. Derek's face was a mess of tears and snot and blood from a split lip. All the arrogance and anger burned away to leave only broken humanity. Their eyes met across the diner, and Marcus saw the question there. What happens now? The answer was written in the code they'd both sworn to uphold. Betrayers face judgment. Hostage-takers face consequences. Men who endangered children face the full wrath of the Brotherhood. But Marcus also saw his own failure reflected in Derek's eyes. The mentor who'd missed the signs. The father figure who'd let his son fall. The leader who'd extended second chances until they became 12th chances and someone nearly died. Marcus's voice came out flat and final. Take him to the warehouse. Secure him. I'll deal with this after I make sure my family's safe. Jake nodded and dragged Derek toward the door. Derek didn't resist, just kept his eyes locked on Marcus until the last possible second, lips forming words that could have been, I'm sorry, or help me, or kill me. Marcus didn't try to read them. Right now, he couldn't afford compassion. Compassion was what had gotten them here in the first place. The diner emptied quickly, brothers escorting Derek outside where the full might of the chapter waited. Through the window, Marcus watched them load Derek into a van, watched the formation reform around it, watched his brothers prepare to render judgment on one of their own. This was the hard part of leadership, the part that stripped away any illusions about brotherhood being easy or pure. Sometimes family meant holding each other accountable. Sometimes it meant cutting away infected tissue to save the whole. Sophie approached with her phone. I called Diana. She's sending a trauma counselor for Rachel and Ethan. Should be here within the hour. Marcus nodded gratefully. Thank you for the water trick. That was smart. Sophie shrugged, but her hands trembled slightly. I've been where Rachel is. Terrified, trapped, waiting for violence. Someone helped me escape. Least I could do was return the favor. She paused. He's not evil, you know. Derek, he's just broken in ways that can't be fixed. Marcus had no response to that because she was probably right, and it changed nothing. Broken men who endangered innocence couldn't be allowed to remain free, regardless of the pity they inspired. That was the terrible arithmetic of leadership, the math that kept him awake some nights, even without the nightmares. He turned his attention back to Rachel, who'd finally relaxed her death grip on Ethan enough that the boy could squirm free. Ethan stared up at Marcus with those huge, innocent eyes, and the child's voice, high and clear, and cutting through all the moral complexity like a knife through fog, spoke 2 words that shattered what remained of Marcus's composure. Gwampa Wolf. Marcus bent down and scooped his grandson into his arms, holding him close enough to feel the boy's heartbeat against his chest. Ethan grabbed his beard again, tugging gently, and Marcus let him because this small pain was nothing, was less than nothing, was proof that they were both alive and safe and together. He looked at Rachel over the child's head. I'm getting you someplace secure. Diana's compound. Full protection until Danny gets home from deployment. Rachel nodded. Exhausted. What about Derek? Marcus's jaw tightened. He's not your concern anymore. He's mine. She studied his face for a long moment, and Marcus wondered what she saw there. Righteous fury or cold vengeance or something uglier and more primal. Finally, she nodded again. Okay, but Marcus, she hesitated. Don't become what you're fighting. Don't let him drag you down to his level. It was too late for that warning. Marcus had already decided Derek's fate the moment he grabbed Rachel and Ethan. The only question now was whether that fate came quick or slow, merciful or educational. The club would vote, but Marcus knew his brothers. They'd follow his lead, and his lead was clear. Men who betrayed Shield sisters, who stalked women, who took children hostage. Those men didn't get second chances. Within the hour, Diana arrived with 2 Shield sisters counselors in a security detail of 4 more bikers Marcus had called from a satellite chapter. They transferred Rachel and Ethan to an armored SUV with tinted windows and bulletproof panels. Professional extraction, the kind Shield sisters had refined over a decade of operations. By the time any potential threats realized where Rachel had gone, she'd be 3 states away in a safe house known to exactly 4 people. Marcus stood in Rosie's parking lot watching the SUV disappear toward the horizon, and only when it was completely out of sight did he allow himself to breathe. Rachel was safe. Ethan was safe. Danny's family would be intact when he rotated home from Afghanistan. Marcus had kept his promise, barely, and only through action and violence and the willingness to do what needed doing. Jake approached, his expression grim. Brothers are waiting at the warehouse. They want to know what happens next. Marcus turned to face his VP, and in that moment, standing in the brutal Arizona sun, with sweat trickling down his spine and Derek's betrayal burning in his chest, he felt every one of his 48 years. He was tired. Soul-deep, bone-weary, exhausted from decades of fighting and bleeding and trying to save men who didn't want to be saved. But tired men didn't get to quit, not when their brothers depended on them, not when justice needed serving. Marcus pulled on his helmet and swung onto his fat boy. Then let's go give them an answer. The ride to the warehouse took 20 minutes through increasingly desolate territory. The building sat 5 miles outside city limits, technically an unincorporated county jurisdiction where law enforcement response times measured in hours rather than minutes. Perfect location for the kind of business that needed privacy. 50 bikes surrounded the warehouse when Marcus arrived, brothers standing in loose groups, smoking and talking in low voices. The mood felt dark, anticipatory, the way it always did before violence became official. These were men who'd seen combat, done time, survived street fights and bar brawls and worse. They knew what was coming because they'd participated in similar rituals before, when other brothers had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. The warehouse doors stood open, spilling artificial light into desert shadows. Marcus dismounted and walked inside, Jake beside him, Cole and Luis falling in behind. The interior was mostly empty, concrete floor, metal rafters, loading bays sealed with roll-down doors. In the center, under harsh fluorescent lights, Derek sat zip-tied to a chair. Someone had cleaned the blood from his face and given him water. Professional courtesy, the respect due a fallen brother before judgment. Derek looked up when Marcus entered, and his eyes held resignation. He knew. They all knew. This was trial, sentencing, and execution all wrapped into one. Marcus pulled up a chair and sat facing Derek, close enough that their knees almost touched. The brothers formed a circle around them, 70 men bearing witness. This was how the club handled internal justice. Public, communal, democratic within reason. Everyone saw, everyone participated, everyone shared responsibility for what came next. Marcus's voice carried to every corner of the warehouse. Derek Nash, you stand accused of betraying this club, our brothers, and the innocents we've sworn to protect. You're accused of selling information to the Sonora cartel, compromising Shield Sister safe houses, stalking a brother's wife, and taking hostages, including a 2-year-old child. How do you answer these charges? Derek's response came out hoarse but clear. Guilty. Good of it. I'm guilty. No defense, no excuses, no pleading for mercy, just acceptance of facts and consequences. Marcus had to respect that, at least. Whatever else Derek had become, he still had enough honor left to own his crimes. Marcus continued, "Protocol says we vote on your fate, but before that vote, you get to speak. Say what you need to say." Derek lifted his head, scanning the circle of faces, brothers who'd ridden with him, fought beside him, called him family. When he spoke, his voice broke on every third word. "I'm sorry for all of it. I betrayed you. I betrayed everything we stand for. I did it because I'm weak and sick, and I couldn't face my demons without chemical courage. I told myself I was protecting Rachel, but I was really just trying to fill the hole inside me where my mother used to be. I knew it was wrong. I did it anyway. And I'll carry that shame into whatever comes next." He focused on Marcus specifically. "Wolf, you tried to save me. You gave me chances I didn't deserve. You treated me like a son when I had nothing and no one. I repaid that kindness with lies and betrayal. I took your grandson hostage. There's no forgiveness for that, and I'm not asking for any. I'm just asking that you remember the brother I was before the pills took me. Remember that guy, and let this broken thing I've become die here tonight." Silence held the warehouse for long moments. Some brothers had tears in their eyes, mourning the loss of who Derek had been. Others showed only cold fury at who he'd become. Marcus felt both emotions warring in his chest. Finally, Cole spoke, his deep voice carrying the weight of his role as sergeant-at-arms. "The code is clear. Betrayers die. But the code also says we're men of honor, not monsters. Derek's asked for death, which means he's choosing execution over exile. I vote we grant him that mercy. Quick, clean, warrior's death. Show him the respect he failed to show others." Luis nodded agreement. "Seconded. He was our brother once. He deserves to die as one, not hunted like an animal." Tommy added his voice. "I vote mercy, but Wolf should pull the trigger. Derek wronged his family most of all." The vote went around the circle, each brother adding his voice to the tally. Unanimous verdict, death. Unanimous method, execution. Unanimous executioner, Marcus. When the last vote was counted, Marcus stood and looked at Derek one final time. This was the moment he'd been dreading since the meeting this morning, since Rachel's terrified phone call, since the confrontation at the diner. He'd known it was coming, had tried every alternative, had exhausted every chance at redemption. Now only one option remained. Marcus drew his Glock and checked it methodically. Chamber, safety, sight picture. Derek watched without flinching, without pleading, without breaking eye contact. The younger man's lips formed words Marcus read even without hearing them. "Thank you. Thank you for making it quick. Thank you for making it clean. Thank you for ending this before I hurt anyone else. Thank you for caring enough to pull the trigger yourself instead of delegating my death to strangers." Marcus raised the weapon, sighting on Derek's forehead, and his finger tightened on the trigger. 1 pound of pressure. 2. 3. His phone rang, shattering the moment. Every head turned toward the sound. Marcus almost ignored it, almost finished what he'd started. But discipline won out over rage. He lowered the weapon and answered, "This better be fucking important." Diana's voice came through, frantic and broken. "Marcus, Rachel's gone. The SUV never made it to the safe house. State police found it abandoned on Route 70. Security detail executed. Rachel and Ethan missing. Someone took them." The world stopped. Everything Marcus had fought for today, every choice he'd made, every line he'd crossed, all of it meaningless because he'd failed at the only thing that mattered. He'd promised Danny he'd keep them safe. He'd promised Rachel she was protected. He'd promised himself he wouldn't fail another woman the way he'd failed Emma. All those promises turned to ash in his mouth. Marcus's voice came out dead and flat. "How long?" Diana's answer carried shame and fear. 90 minutes, maybe more. Whoever did this knew the route, knew the security, knew exactly when to hit them. This was planned, and Marcus. Professional. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities, and one rose to the top with terrible clarity. The cartel. They took them because Derek's compromised and I'm coming after their operation. Rachel and Ethan are leverage. That's our assessment, Diana confirmed. We've got every Shield Sisters resource mobilized. But Marcus, these people don't fuck around. If they're taking hostages, they're planning to make an example. Marcus holstered his weapon and looked at Derek, still zip-tied to the chair, eyes wide with horror as he'd heard the entire conversation. Where would they take them? You know the cartel safe houses. Where? Derek's voice came out shaking. Wolf, I swear I didn't know they were planning this. I would never. Marcus crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, grabbed Derek's shirt, lifted him, chair and all, and slammed him back down. The impact rattled through the warehouse. I don't care what you knew or didn't know. Where would they take them? Derek's composure finally cracked. The ranch. There's a ranch 30 miles south of the border, just outside Hermosillo. That's where they take high-value targets. But Wolf, you can't just assault that place. It's a fortress. You'd need an army. Marcus released him and turned to face his brothers, and when he spoke, his voice carried the absolute conviction of a man with nothing left to lose. Then we're bringing an army. Every brother, every weapon, every favor owed. We cross the border tonight. We hit that ranch, and we bring my family home. Anyone who stands in our way dies. Questions? Jake stepped forward. That's suicide, Wolf. Even if we make it past Mexican authorities, even if we survive the cartel security, we'll be fugitives in 2 countries. The club won't survive this. Marcus met his VP's eyes with the cold stare of the warrior he'd tried so hard to bury. I don't care about the club surviving. I care about Rachel and Ethan surviving. Now you're either with me or you're not. Choose. For a long, tense moment, the warehouse held its breath. Then Jake nodded slowly. Ride or die, brother. Always. One by one, every brother in the circle stepped forward, pledging themselves to what was almost certainly a suicide mission. Cole, Luis, Tommy, 50 more voices joining the chorus until the concrete walls rang with 70 men swearing the oldest oath warriors knew. We fight together, we die together. We leave no one behind. Marcus turned back to Derek. You're coming with us. You know the layout, the defenses, the patterns. You help us get them out. Maybe you buy back a fraction of your honor before you die. Derek nodded frantically. Yes, anything, just let me fix this. Please. Marcus cut his zip ties and hauled him to his feet. You don't fix this, Derek. You burn with us. But if my grandson dies because you gave us bad intel, I'll make sure you burn a lot slower than everyone else. Understood? Derek's face had gone gray, but he nodded. Understood. The warehouse exploded into coordinated chaos, brothers running to vehicles, pulling weapons from hidden caches, strapping on body armor. Radio chatter filled the air as scouts reported positions. Logistics coordinators plotted routes. Medics packed trauma supplies. This was military operation. 40 years of combined combat experience focused on single objective, rescue mission across international borders with 0 legal authority and maximum violence authorized. Marcus stood in the center of it all, watching his brotherhood transform into war machine, and felt something ancient wake up in his chest. This was who he'd been in Vietnam, who he'd tried to leave behind, who he'd buried under decades of civilian life and club business and pretending peace was possible. But peace was illusion, always had been. Sooner or later, every warrior faced the moment when talking stopped and killing started. Tonight was that moment. Jake appeared at his elbow, pressing a tablet into his hands. Diana sent satellite imagery of the target. 3 buildings, main house and 2 outbuildings. Estimated 20 to 30 hostiles on site. Unknown number of civilians, could be workers, could be other hostages. Perimeter is walled, 8-foot concrete with razor wire. Single vehicle entrance, reinforced gate. This is going to be a bloodbath, Wolf. Marcus studied the images, his Marine Corps training overlaying tactical assessment on every detail. Approaches, kill zones, cover, concealment. He'd conducted similar operations in Hugh City, 1968, fighting room to room through urban warfare. This was smaller scale, but same principles. Speed, surprise, overwhelming violence of action. His finger traced routes on the screen. We hit them at 300, their lowest alertness point. 3 teams, Jake takes the gate with breaching charges, Cole flanks right with suppressing fire, I take points team straight to the main house. Luis coordinates overwatch from high ground. Tommy manages extraction vehicles. We're in and out in 15 minutes or we die trying. Jake nodded slowly. And Derek? Marcus glanced at the broken man standing under guard nearby. Derek goes in first. Shield for the first man through the door. If he's lying about the layout, he takes the first bullets instead of us. It was cruel, coldly pragmatic, and exactly what the situation required. Derek had created this situation through his betrayal. Now he'd pay the price by putting his body between his brothers and the consequences of his actions. If he survived, maybe there was microscopic piece of redemption in that. If he didn't, he'd die serving the brotherhood he'd betrayed. Either way, justice balanced. The preparation took 2 hours, loading vehicles, distributing ammunition, painting faces with camouflage patterns. Brothers called families, left messages, made peace with the possibility they wouldn't see sunrise. This was the price of brotherhood, the cost of living by a code that valued loyalty over law, honor over safety, family over everything, including self-preservation. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky the color of blood and fire, 70 bikers prepared for war. 17 years later, sitting on his porch with his grandson, Marcus Donovan would remember this moment as the beginning of everything. The last ride that defined legacy, the operation that transformed Hell's Angels from motorcycle club into legend. But tonight, standing in the gathering darkness with his brothers, he only knew one thing. Rachel and Ethan were out there, terrified and alone, held by men who understood nothing of mercy or honor. And Marcus was coming for them with the full weight of brotherhood behind him, ready to paint the desert with blood if that's what family required. Jake's voice cut through his thoughts. All teams ready. We roll in 10. Marcus nodded, pulled on his helmet, and climbed onto his fat boy one more time. The engine roared to life, joined by 69 others in perfect synchronization. The sound rolled across the desert like thunder, announcing their intentions to anyone listening. The wolves were hunting tonight, and mercy was off the table. They rolled out in formation, headlights cutting through darkness, riding toward the border and whatever waited beyond. Riding toward violence and rescue and the terrible mathematics of trading lives for lives. Riding because a man's word was everything. And Marcus had given his word to keep his family safe, no matter the cost, no matter the consequences, no matter what he had to become. The convoy disappeared into the night, carrying warriors toward their destiny, and Marcus Donovan toward the moment that would define every day after. The moment when age and wisdom stepped aside, and the young wolf inside him remembered how to hunt. The convoy hit a roadblock 12 miles from the border. 3 state police cruisers arranged in a chevron pattern, blocking both lanes, light bars painting the desert and strobing red and blue. Marcus raised his fist, and the formation halted. Engines idling low, 70 men waiting for orders, while every instinct screamed to punch through and keep moving. Sheriff Tom Wade stepped out of the lead cruiser, belly straining against his uniform shirt, hand resting on his service weapon with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never faced real danger. Marcus knew Wade by reputation, corrupt to his bones, cartel-bought, the kind of lawman who made good cops look bad by association. The sheriff's smile was all teeth and malice as he approached Marcus's bike. Wade's voice carried false joviality that didn't reach his eyes. Marcus Donovan, fancy meeting you here. Where might you boys be headed at this hour? Marcus kept both hands visible on the handlebars, projecting calm while calculating distances and angles. Club business, nothing that concerns you. Wade circled the bike slowly, boots crunching on gravel. See, that's where you're wrong. Everything that happens in my county concerns me. especially when I get reports of a biker gang mobilizing like it's preparing for war. He stopped in front of Marcus, close enough that Marcus could smell coffee and chewing tobacco on his breath. I'm going to need you to step off that bike and place your hands on your head. Marcus didn't move. On what charges? Wade pulled handcuffs from his belt. How about conspiracy to commit murder, unlawful assembly, weapons violations for starters? Or we can add resisting arrest if you make this difficult. He raised his voice so every brother could hear. All of you, engines off, hands where we can see them. Anyone who runs gets shot. Jake's voice crackled through Marcus's helmet comms, barely controlled fury. Wolf, say the word. We can punch through this. Marcus keyed his mic with thumb pressure, invisible to Wade. Negative, stand down. That's an order. Because fighting cops, even corrupt cops, was line you couldn't uncross. Kill a sheriff, and every law enforcement agency from here to D.C. would hunt them until the last brother fell. Rachel and Ethan needed rescuers, not martyrs. Marcus had to play this different, had to think instead of react. He killed his engine and dismounted slowly, hands moving to his head. Wade's smile widened as he approached with cuffs, and Marcus saw triumph there. The petty victory of small men wielding power over better men constrained by civilization. The metal closed around Marcus's wrists with precision that suggested Wade had done this many times before. Wade leaned close, voice dropping to whisper only Marcus could hear. The cartel says hello. They also say your daughter-in-law and grandson are real comfortable down south. Be a shame if something happened to change that. White-hot rage flooded Marcus's system, but 40 years of discipline held it in check. He met Wade's eyes with the flat stare of a man making promises. You think you're safe because you wear a badge. You're not. Wade laughed and shoved Marcus toward the cruiser, threatening a peace officer. That's another charge. He addressed the brothers still sitting on their bikes. Rest of you, turn around and head home. I'm feeling generous tonight, so I'm only taking your president. But if I see any of you heading south, I'll assume you're up to no good and act accordingly. Jake dismounted, taking one step forward. You can't just... Cole's hand on Jake's shoulder stopped him mid-sentence. The older man's voice carried the weight of experience. Stand down, brother. Wolf knows what he's doing. Marcus let them load him into the cruiser's back seat, let Wade drive him away from his brothers and toward the county jail. Let the moment stretch until Wade's confidence grew into carelessness. Because men like Wade made mistakes when they felt safe. And Marcus was very good at exploiting mistakes. The county facility squatted on the edge of town like a concrete tumor, razor wire catching moonlight in silvered spirals. Wade walked Marcus through processing with exaggerated courtesy, making sure every camera caught the president of Hell's Angels Desert Chapter being booked on multiple felonies. By the time they finished paperwork, it was past midnight, and Marcus was being led to a cell block that smelled of disinfectant and defeat. The guard, younger, probably local kid working his way through college, opened a cell containing 5 other inmates. Marcus read them instantly. 2 gangbangers from rival set, 1 meth addict going through withdrawal, 1 middle-aged white guy who screamed domestic violence, and 1 Hispanic male with dead eyes and Sonora cartel tattoos visible on his neck. The guard shoved Marcus inside and slammed the door. Breakfast at 6, don't cause trouble. Marcus claimed the empty bunk and sat, back against concrete wall, evaluating his cellmates while they evaluated him. The cartel soldier, Carlos, based on the name inked above the MS-13 Serpent, smiled without warmth. El Lobo, the wolf. Jefe said you might be coming. Marcus said nothing, just held the stare until Carlos looked away first, establishing dominance without violence. Old prison yard wisdom Marcus had learned doing 6 months in county back in '79 for assault. Some lessons stayed with you forever. The night passed with Marcus in meditation, conserving energy, planning contingencies. Every scenario ended the same way. He needed to escape, needed to get to Mexico, needed to reach Rachel and Ethan before the cartel decided hostages were more trouble than leverage. But escape from county lockup while facing multiple felonies? That required help from outside. At 043, 40 years of military conditioning meant his body woke at the same time regardless of circumstances. Marcus heard footsteps approaching his cell. Not the regular guard rotation. These steps were lighter, quicker, purposeful. The door opened and Sophie Chen stood there in civilian clothes, holding a clipboard that identified her as legal counsel. Her voice carried urgency masked as professional courtesy. "Mr. Donovan, I'm your attorney. We need to discuss your case privately." The guard, different one from last night, older and more alert, checked her credentials and shrugged. "Interview room 2, 15 minutes." They walked through institutional corridors painted that particular shade of green that existed nowhere in nature, designed to depress rather than soothe. The interview room held a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs. Sophie waited until the door closed before speaking. The clipboard dropped and her demeanor shifted completely. "Jake sent me. We've got 36 hours before your arraignment, and Wade's pushing for no bail. He wants you stuck here while the cartel handles Rachel and Ethan." Marcus leaned forward, voice low. "Tell Jake, Operation Broken Shield. He'll know what that means." Sophie's eyes widened. "That's the Vietnam extraction protocol. Wolf, that's—" Marcus cut her off. "Suicide mission against impossible odds requiring perfect coordination and willingness to die trying." "I know. Tell him anyway." She nodded slowly, committing it to memory. "There's something else. Diana got intel from her FBI contact. Rachel's not just Danny's wife. She's undercover federal agent. Has been for 2 years. The whole marriage, the pregnancy, everything. It was deep cover operation targeting the cartel's trafficking network." The information hit Marcus like physical blow. His daughter-in-law was FBI. His son Danny knew, had to have known, was probably part of the operation himself. The deployment to Afghanistan could have been cover for something else entirely. Everything Marcus thought he understood about his family had been built on lies designed to protect an operation he'd never been briefed on. Sophie continued, reading his face. "Danny's not in Afghanistan. He's in Sonora working the cartel from inside with Mexican authorities. Has been for 8 months. He was 2 weeks from extraction when Derek's betrayal exposed Rachel's identity. Now the cartel has her and your grandson, and they're using them to draw Danny out." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, feeling pieces slot into place. This wasn't just revenge or leverage. This was bait for bigger fish. The cartel wanted Danny, wanted to make an example of a federal agent who'd infiltrated their organization. Rachel and Ethan were just collateral, innocent casualties in a shadow war Marcus hadn't known was being fought. When he opened his eyes again, his voice carried steel. "Get a message to Danny. Tell him to stay hidden. I'm getting Rachel and Ethan out." Sophie's expression showed doubt. "Wolf, you're in jail. Wade's got you locked down tight. Even if the brothers could break you out, the heat would be—" The door burst open. 3 men in street clothes, cartel, judging by their tattoos and the dead-eyed professionalism with which they moved. The first carried a shank fashioned from a sharpened toothbrush. Sophie screamed and threw herself against the wall as they converged on Marcus. Old training activated automatically. Marcus grabbed the table with both hands and flipped it toward the first attacker. Steel edge catching him across the knees. The man went down hard. The second came at Marcus from the left, shank leading. Marcus sidestepped, caught the wrist, used the attacker's momentum to slam his head into the concrete wall. Skull met cinder block with sickening crack, and the body dropped limp. The third attacker was smarter, hanging back, looking for opening. Marcus faced him squarely, hands up in prison fighting stance he'd learned decades ago. They circled each other while Sophie screamed for guards who weren't coming. Wade had probably arranged this, given the attackers access and disabled cameras. The attacker feinted high, went low, blade seeking Marcus's femoral artery. Marcus pivoted, took a shallow cut across his ribs, and drove his elbow into the man's temple. Once, twice, 3 times until the body stopped moving. Blood poured from Marcus's side, hot and sticky, soaking through his jumpsuit. Guards finally arrived, 6 of them, batons drawn, shouting contradictory orders. Sophie was pulled from the room, screaming about attempted murder and corruption. Marcus was zip-tied face down on the floor while they secured the scene. 2 attackers unconscious, 1 dead from skull fracture. Wade would charge Marcus with manslaughter at minimum, probably first-degree murder. Self-defense wouldn't matter to a judge in the cartel's pocket. They dragged Marcus to medical wing, stitched his side with efficiency, suggesting the doctor had treated knife wounds before, and locked him in isolation cell with 24-hour camera surveillance. No windows, no contact, nothing but concrete box and fluorescent lights that never dimmed. Hours passed. Marcus meditated, controlled his breathing, kept his mind focused despite pain radiating from his ribs with every breath. This was setback, not defeat. The brothers were still out there. Jake knew the plan, and Marcus had survived worse than county jail isolation. He'd survived Khe-Sanh, he'd survived losing Kate to cancer, he'd survived watching Emma die. He'd survived this too. At 1400 hours by his internal clock, footsteps approached again. The door opened and Jake stood there wearing guard uniform that didn't quite fit, holding Glock he'd probably taken from the real guard. Jake's voice carried grim satisfaction. "Told you I had a plan." Marcus stood slowly, ribs screaming protest. "How many did you have to hurt?" Jake handed him the guard's uniform. 2 knocked out, tied up in storage closet. Nothing permanent. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before shift change reveals them." They moved fast through corridors Jake had obviously memorized, avoiding cameras with precision that spoke to careful reconnaissance. Marcus pulled on the uniform as they walked, becoming anonymous official in institutional maze. They hit the loading dock where Luis waited with unmarked van, engine running. Marcus climbed in back, and Luis punched the accelerator before the door fully closed. They were through the gate and onto the highway within 90 seconds of leaving the isolation cell. Professional extraction, military precision applied to civilian target. Jake settled in the passenger seat and looked back at Marcus with expression mixing pride and fear. Jake's voice was steady despite circumstances. "Operation Broken Shield is go. We've got teams staging at 3 locations. Cole's coordinating with Diana. Shield Sisters Network is evacuating all safe houses, moving every woman and child to secure locations the cartel doesn't know about. Tommy's handling logistics, getting weapons and vehicles ready. Luis has been hacking Wade's communications, intercepting his reports to the cartel." Marcus nodded, pain from his ribs fading into background noise as combat mindset took over. "Rachel?" Luis answered while navigating through traffic. "Still alive, still at the ranch outside Hermosillo. Diana's FBI contact has satellite surveillance. They're keeping her and Ethan in the main house, probably using them to draw Danny out. Problem is, Danny knows it's trap, but he's going anyway." His team hits the ranch at 0300 tomorrow with Mexican federal support. Marcus checked his watch, broken during the fight, but Luis's dashboard showed 1447. "That gives us 12 hours to coordinate. We can't let Danny walk into this alone." Jake turned in his seat, face serious. "Wolf, this isn't just rescue mission anymore. This is full-scale assault on cartel stronghold with federal agents, Mexican authorities, and 70 pissed-off bikers all converging on same target. Chain of command is going to be a nightmare. We need to coordinate with Danny's team, or we're all going to die shooting each other in the dark." Marcus pulled out his phone. Jake had brought it along with the uniform and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago but never called. It rang 4 times before male voice answered. Young but carrying command authority, Marcus recognized as officer training. The voice was wary. "This line is secure. Identify." Marcus's throat tightened. "Danny, it's Dad." Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. When Danny spoke again, his voice cracked. "Jesus Christ, Dad. Where are you?" Marcus kept it simple. "Heading south with 70 brothers. Got word my grandson and his mother are in trouble. Thought you might want backup." Danny's laugh carried no humor. "Backup? Dad, you're talking about assaulting fortified cartel compound on foreign soil with no legal authority. That's active war." Marcus's voice went flat. "That's being grandfather. Now you want to compare operational plans, or you want to keep pretending you're surprised I'm coming?" Another pause. Then Danny's tone shifted to pure business. "Okay, here's situation. Rachel's cover was blown 3 days ago when Derek's intel reached cartel leadership. They grabbed her and Ethan to draw me out because they know I'm the agent who's been feeding information to Mexican federales. They've got the ranch locked down tight, 30 soldiers, heavy weapons, kill zones covering all approaches. Mexican special forces are giving me 12 operators for the assault. Against those odds, we're looking at 50% casualties minimum. Marcus did the math. 12 operators plus 70 bikers equals 82 shooters. That changes your odds. Danny's response came after long consideration. It also changes the international incident when U.S. civilians conduct military operation on Mexican soil. Dad, if you cross that border with club members, you're fugitives. You can't come back. Ever. Marcus looked at Jake, who nodded without hesitation, looked at Luis, whose hands tightened on steering wheel, but whose expression showed resolve. 70 brothers had committed themselves to this mission, knowing the cost. They'd ride or die together, whatever came after. Marcus's voice carried absolute certainty. Son, I made promise to keep your family safe. I keep my promises. Now tell me where to stage and what time to hit. Danny surrendered to inevitable. Coordinates are 29.0892 north, 110.9617 west. Ranch sits in valley 2 clicks from main road. We hit at Euro 300. Your brothers create diversion at front gate, draw their forces. Mexican operators and I breach from the east. You hold their attention for 8 minutes while we extract Rachel and Ethan. Then everyone disperses, exfils separately. I've got safe passage arranged for you back across the border once it's done. Marcus memorized the numbers. 8 minutes. We can do 8 minutes. Danny's voice softened slightly. Dad, I need you to understand. This isn't combat operation where everyone goes home. Some of your brothers are going to die. Maybe most of them. Maybe you. Are they ready for that? Marcus thought about 40 years of brotherhood, about men who'd pledged themselves to code bigger than self-interest, about warriors who chose meaning over safety every single day. They've been ready since Vietnam. Some things matter more than survival. Danny's response came quiet but clear. Love you, Dad. See you on the other side. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, at the reflection of his own face in the darkened screen. 48 years old, looking 60, wearing stolen guard uniform and bleeding from knife wound, about to lead suicide mission into Mexico for family he only half understood. This was the moment Kate had warned him about years ago, in the final days before cancer took her. Her voice echoed from memory. Marcus, someday you're going to have to choose between the man you are and the man you want to be. When that day comes, choose wisely. He thought she meant choosing between club life and civilian respectability. Now he understood she'd meant something else entirely. Choosing between survival and purpose, between living another day and dying for something that mattered. The choice was easy. It had always been easy. Luis pulled the van into an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Tucson, where the Brotherhood waited. 70 bikes, 20 vehicles, enough weapons to supply small army. Brothers in various stages of preparation, some painting faces with camouflage, some checking weapons, some sitting in quiet meditation before battle. Cole approached as Marcus climbed out, and the big man's expression showed he knew. Cole's voice rumbled like distant thunder. Brothers heard about the jailbreak. They know crossing into Mexico means we can't come back. I gave them option to walk away. No judgment, no shame. None of them took it. Marcus surveyed his brothers, some as old as him, Vietnam veterans with gray beards and hard miles. Some younger, Iraq and Afghanistan vets looking for new wars. Some barely out of their 20s, kids who'd found family in the club. All of them ready to die for code they'd sworn to uphold. Protect the innocent, defend the helpless. Stand for those who couldn't stand themselves. Jake handed Marcus his cut, and he pulled it on like armor. Brief them. I want everyone to understand the odds, the risks, what we're walking into. The Brotherhood gathered close, and Marcus climbed onto the hood of a truck so everyone could see him. 70 faces looked up, and Marcus saw fear there, and determination, and something transcendent. Men finding meaning and mission bigger than themselves. His voice carried to every corner of the warehouse. Brothers, you know me. You know I don't bullshit. So here's truth. What we're about to do is suicide mission. We're assaulting fortified cartel compound with professional soldiers who'll kill us without hesitation. Best case scenario, half of us die. Worst case, none of us make it out. He paused, letting that sink in. Mexican authorities will declare us terrorists. U.S. government will disavow us. Our families will suffer consequences of our actions. Anyone who survives can never come home. We'll be fugitives, outlaws in the truest sense. Marcus scanned the faces, meeting each man's eyes. So why the hell would anyone volunteer for this? Because my grandson, 2 years old, innocent, never hurt anyone, is down there scared and alone. Because my daughter-in-law needs us. Because when the system fails, when law enforcement is bought, when evil men take hostages, someone has to stand in the gap. That's what brotherhood means. Not riding on Sundays, dying on Tuesdays. Silence held for a moment, then Tommy spoke up. What's the plan, Wolf? Marcus gestured to Jake, who unrolled map on the truck hood. Three-pronged assault. Main force, 50 brothers, hits front gate at exactly 300. You don't need to breach, just draw their attention and pin them down. Second team, 15 brothers led by Cole, flanks from the west, provides suppressing fire. Third team, that's me, Jake, Luis, Derek, and Tommy, goes over the wall from the north and moves to the main house. Derek's name drew angry murmurs. The traitor stood off to one side, hands zip-tied, guarded by two brothers. Marcus raised his hand for silence. Derek knows the layout. He goes in first. If he's lying, he takes the bullets. If he's truthful, maybe he buys back fragment of his honor. Cole pointed to the timeline. 8 minutes from first shot to extraction. What happens if we can't hold that long? Marcus's voice went flat. Then we die holding, and Danny's team completes mission without us. The priority is Rachel and Ethan's survival. Everything else is secondary. Luis added tactical details. Communication will be via encrypted radio. Code words. Wolfpack means advance. Shepherd means fall back. Emma means mission abort. We move fast, we hit hard, and we trust each other. Questions? Dozens of hands raised, and the next hour dissolved into detailed planning. Assignments, fallback positions, medical protocols, last wills and testaments. Brothers called families, some saying goodbye, some lying about where they were going, some just saying they loved them one more time. Marcus found himself standing alone as the sun set, watching desert sky transform into riot of color. His phone buzzed, text from Diana. Shield sisters are clear. All women and children secured. Whatever happens tonight, you protected them. Emma would be proud. He responded with 2 words. Thank you. Another text, this one from number he didn't recognize. Dad, when this is over, I want to sit on that porch and drink beer and talk about everything I should have told you years ago. Don't die before we get that chance, Danny. Marcus smiled despite everything and typed back, deal. Save me a cold one. At 2100 hours, the convoy rolled out. 70 bikes and 20 vehicles moving south toward border with Mexico and whatever waited beyond. They traveled without lights, using night vision and decades of combined experience navigating desert terrain and darkness. Border Patrol would see them coming. Luis had arranged that, bribing the right people, ensuring certain sections of fence would be unmanned at certain times. They crossed into Mexico at 22:45 hours through gap in the fence that shouldn't exist but did. Legacy of decades of cartel corruption reaching into American law enforcement. Mexican soil felt no different than Arizona. Same desert, same stars, same heat radiating off sand, even hours after sunset. But everything had changed because now they were invaders, foreign nationals conducting military operation on sovereign territory. The ranch appeared on horizon at 0245, lights blazing, guards visible on walls, exactly as advertised. Marcus halted the convoy 2 clicks out and gathered team leaders. Under moonlight, they synchronized watches, confirmed radio frequencies, ran through contingencies one final time. The assault force painted their faces, checked their weapons, made peace with probability they'd die within the hour. At 0255, Marcus pulled Derek aside. The younger man looked hollowed out, broken, ready for whatever came next. Marcus removed the zip ties and handed him a weapon. Unloaded, symbolic more than practical. Marcus's voice carried no warmth, You go through that door first. You clear the way. You take the hits meant for better men. Maybe you survive, maybe you don't. Either way, this is your last chance to mean something. Derek accepted the weapon with shaking hands. Thank you, Wolf, for letting me deal like a brother instead of a traitor. Marcus said nothing, just gripped Derek's shoulder once. Acknowledgement of what they'd been before everything went wrong. Then he turned to address the Brotherhood one final time. 70 men formed in loose circle around him, all waiting for final words before battle. His voice carried across the desert. Brothers, we ride in 3 minutes. Some of us won't ride out. That's the price of the code. But every man here chose this moment, chose this fight, chose to stand for something bigger than himself. That choice makes you warriors. That choice makes you heroes. That choice makes you mine. He paused, feeling emotion rise in his throat. When they write our story, and they will write it, because tonight becomes legend. Let them say we rode for family. We fought for innocence. We died free men who chose honor over safety. Let them say the last wolves of the old brotherhood went down together, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Cole's deep voice rumbled. Ride or die, Wolf, all the way. 70 voices echoed the call. Ride Radney, dear nine. Marcus checked his watch, 02:58. 2 minutes. He mounted his fat boy one last time. Feeling the familiar weight settle into place, Jake pulled up beside him, and Luis flanked his other side. Behind them, 50 brothers formed up in attack formation. On the ridgeline to the west, Cole positioned his team with scoped rifles. And somewhere in the darkness to the east, Danny and his Mexican operators moved into position for extraction. The last 2 minutes stretched infinite and instant. Marcus thought about Kate, about Emma, about every choice that led to this moment. Thought about the men around him, warriors who'd become family, family who'd become army. Thought about Rachel and Ethan somewhere in that compound, terrified, waiting for rescue that might never come. His radio crackled, Danny's voice calm and professional. All units, stand by. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. Marcus's hand tightened on the throttle. Beside him, Jake's jaw clenched with focus. Behind them, an army held its breath. 10 seconds. The ranch compound sat ahead, oblivious to death approaching from 3 directions. Guards walked their patterns. Lights blazed. Life continued for men who didn't know they had seconds left to live. 5 seconds. Marcus thought about grandfathers who got to grow old bouncing babies on their knees, teaching them to ride bikes, telling them stories. He'd trade every moment left in his life for chance to be that grandfather. But fate dealt different cards, and warriors played the hand they got. Danny's voice cut through the night. Execute, execute, execute. Marcus twisted the throttle wide open, and 70 engines roared to life simultaneously. They charged the compound like cavalry from hell. Headlights blazing, engines screaming, 50 bikers carrying death toward men who'd made fatal mistake of taking innocent hostages. The front gate exploded under breaching charges Tommy's team had placed during final approach. Gunfire erupted from the walls. Cartel soldiers were reacting too slowly, caught flat-footed by assault that shouldn't have been possible. Marcus's team went left, following Derek toward the north wall. Bullets snapped past, kicking up sand, sparking off vehicles. Cole's team opened up from the ridge, precision rifle fire dropping guards before they could acquire targets. The diversion was working. Cartel forces concentrated on the main assault, leaving the north approach thinly defended. Jake threw grappling hooks, and they scaled the wall, moving with practiced efficiency of men who trained for exactly this scenario. The compound interior was chaos, buildings, vehicles, panicked soldiers running toward the main gate where 50 brothers laid down suppressing fire that turned night into day with muzzle flashes. Derek led them through the madness, moving toward the main house where Rachel and Ethan waited. Time dilated. Every second became hour, every heartbeat a lifetime. Marcus saw Tommy take rounds through the chest, saw him fall but keep shooting, covering their advance with his dying breath. Saw Luis drop a soldier who'd flanked them. Precision shot that saved Marcus's life. Saw Derek finally take the bullet meant for him, going down hard but getting back up, pressing forward because he'd found something worth dying for. The main house door exploded inward. Danny's team was already inside, moving room to room with Mexican operators providing backup. Marcus's team breached from rear, and they converged on the central room where cartel leadership had made their final stand. Rachel sat zip-tied to a chair, holding Ethan against her chest, using her body as shield. 5 cartel soldiers surrounded them, weapons drawn, ready to execute hostages before surrendering. The cartel leader, El Tigre, Marcus recognized him from intelligence photos, held pistol to Rachel's head. El Tigre's voice carried cruel certainty. Drop your weapons or she dies, right now. Marcus met Rachel's eyes across the room and saw her mouth silent words. Save Ethan. Time stopped. Every man in that room calculated odds, evaluated options, prepared for whatever came next. This was the moment when heroes died or were born, when calculations became irrelevant and training met reality's cold mathematics. Derek was closest. Derek, who'd betrayed everyone, who'd caused this situation, who'd spent the last hour trying to die with honor. He lunged forward, throwing himself between El Tigre and Rachel. The pistol fired, and Derek's body jerked with impact. But his momentum carried him into El Tigre, knocking the cartel leader's aim wide, giving Danny a clear shot. Danny took it. Single shot, center mass, El Tigre down. The other soldiers tried to react, but Mexican operators were faster, professional, lethal. It was over in 3 seconds. 5 cartel soldiers dead, Derek bleeding out on the floor, Rachel and Ethan alive and crying and alive. Danny cut Rachel's zip ties while Marcus grabbed Ethan, holding his grandson close, feeling the boy's heart beat against his chest like prayer answered. The toddler's arms wrapped around Marcus's neck, and his voice, terrified but alive, gasped, "Guampa Wolf!" Marcus held him tighter. "I got you, little warrior. You're safe now. You're going home." Outside, the battle raged for another 4 minutes before cartel forces broke and ran. 50 brothers had held the gate, turned compound entrance into killing field, made attackers pay for every inch in blood and brass. When silence finally fell, 13 brothers lay dead and 20 more were wounded, but mission was accomplished. Rachel and Ethan were free. The extraction was chaos. Wounded loaded into vehicles, dead carried because you never left brothers behind. Everyone moving fast before Mexican military arrived and complicated everything further. Danny's federales held perimeter, giving them minutes to disappear into darkness. Marcus paused beside Derek's body. The younger man was dying, lung shot, drowning in his own blood, but his eyes were clear for the first time in months, pain burning away the fog of addiction, leaving only clarity. Derek's voice came out bubbling and wet. "I fixed it. Wolf, I fixed it." Marcus knelt beside him, taking his hand. "You did, brother. You died like a warrior. Emma would forgive you. I forgive you." Derek smiled, blood on his teeth, and his grip tightened. "Tell the brothers. Tell them I remembered. At the end, I remembered who I was." Marcus stayed with him until the light left his eyes, until the hand in his went slack, until the brother he'd failed was finally at peace. Then he stood, lifted the body, carried Derek to the extraction vehicle because brothers didn't get left behind. Not even broken ones, especially not broken ones who found redemption in their final moments. The convoy scattered into the night, taking separate routes, dispersing across the border through dozen different crossings. Danny had arranged safe passage for Rachel and Ethan, official channels, immunity negotiated through FBI connections. But for Marcus and his brothers, there was no official path. They crossed back into America as ghosts, as legends, as outlaws who'd declared war on evil and won. By dawn, 70 bikers minus 13 dead were back on American soil, technically wanted by both governments. Actually untouchable because what prosecution could touch men who'd pulled off the impossible? Wade was under federal investigation, his corruption exposed. The cartel compound was rubble, operations disrupted for months. And Rachel and Ethan were safe in witness protection, preparing to testify against the entire network. Marcus stood in the warehouse where they'd launched the mission, surrounded by surviving brothers, and felt the weight of it all, victory and grief, success and pride and profound exhaustion. He was a fugitive now, could never fully come home, would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. But his family was safe. His grandson would grow up free. His brothers had proven the code wasn't empty words, but living truth worth dying for. Cole approached, face smeared with dirt and blood, eyes reflecting the toll of battle. What now, Wolf? Marcus looked at the men who'd ridden into hell with him, survivors of impossible assault, warriors who'd earned their patches 1,000 times over. Now we rebuild, hide in plain sight, keep the shield alive, protect the next woman who needs us. And we remember, his voice cracked slightly, we remember the 13 brothers who didn't make it home. Jake Stipishforen, I've got the names memorized. Tommy McKenna, Luis Rodriguez, 9 others. We'll build memorial, make sure they're never forgotten. Marcus nodded, throat too tight for words. The victory was real. The cost was real too. Both truths had to coexist, had to be honored, had to be carried forward by men strong enough to bear the weight of what brotherhood demanded. His phone buzzed, text from Danny. Thank you, Dad, for everything. Rachel and Ethan's safe. I'll find a way to see you again. Someday. I love you. Marcus typed back with thumbs that suddenly felt heavy. Love you too, son. Take care of my grandkids. Plural. Tell Rachel to give Ethan brothers and sisters to protect. That's how we win. The brotherhood dispersed slowly, some heading to safe houses, some to families who'd been told they were dead, some to new lives in places where Hell's Angels weren't wanted for international incidents. Marcus stayed until the last brother left, until only Cole remained, standing silent guard the way he'd done for 20 years. Cole's voice rumbled. You did good, Wolf, better than good. You saved them. Marcus stared at the place where Luis had stood hours earlier, joking and confident and alive. We all did. Every brother who rode tonight, every man who gave his life. This wasn't my victory. This was ours. Cole nodded. Still, you led us. Through everything. The code held because you held it first. They stood in comfortable silence. 2 old warriors who'd survived another war, earned another set of scars, proven once again that age and wisdom beaten youth and enthusiasm when the stakes were highest. Finally, Marcus pulled off his cut and looked at the patches sewn there. President, founder, Hell's Angels. Symbols of brotherhood that had defined him for 3 decades. He handed the cut to Cole. It's yours now. I'm retiring. Can't be president and fugitive simultaneously. Club needs legitimate leadership. Cole refused to take it. Brothers won't accept my leadership. They ride for you, Wolf. Always have. Always will. Marcus forced the cut into Cole's hands. Then tell them I'm riding for them by stepping aside. Tell them the best way to honor tonight is to survive, to thrive, to make our brothers' deaths mean something by continuing the mission they died for. Cole finally accepted the cut, and Marcus saw tears in the big man's eyes. Where will you go? Marcus thought about it, about the ranch sitting empty, about years of memories built in Arizona, about life he could never fully reclaim. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I can watch my grandson grow up from distance, somewhere I can rest. Cole embraced him, brief and hard. You earn a must rest, brother. Ride safe. Marcus walked out of the warehouse into dawn light, feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier than he'd ever felt. No cut, no badge of office, no official title, just Marcus Donovan, 48 years old, fugitive, grandfather, warrior who traded everything for family and found the price acceptable. 6 weeks after the raid, Marcus sat in a motel room outside Santa Fe, watching CNN replay footage that had dominated news cycles since the story broke. The anchor's face carried practiced gravity as she narrated aerial shots of the destroyed cartel compound. What officials are calling the most brazen act of vigilante justice in modern American history. 70 members of the Hells Angels motorcycle club crossed into Mexico, assaulted a fortified drug cartel stronghold, and rescued 2 hostages in an operation that left 18 cartel soldiers dead and 13 bikers killed in action. The screen cut to press conference footage, FBI director standing at podium, flanked by DEA and Mexican officials. While we cannot condone civilians conducting military operations on foreign soil, the intelligence gathered during this incident has led to the dismantling of one of the largest human trafficking networks operating between Mexico and the United States. 23 women and children have been rescued. 14 corrupt law enforcement officials, including Sheriff Tom Wade of Pima County, Arizona, are facing federal charges. Marcus muted the television and stared at his reflection in the dark screen. 6 weeks of living in motels, moving every 3 days, using cash and burner phones, avoiding cameras and facial recognition systems. 6 weeks of being ghost in the country he'd served and bled for. The price of keeping his family safe. His current phone, the fourth since Mexico, buzzed with encrypted text from Jake. Trial starts tomorrow. Media calling it the outlaw dozen. All 12 surviving assault leaders facing federal charges. Cole's handling it. We're good. Marcus typed back. Keep your head down. Don't play hero for cameras. Jake's response came immediately. Too late. Already gave interview to Rolling Stone. Cover story next month. The Last Wolves, how a biker gang became America's conscience. You're going to hate it. Marcus almost smiled despite everything. Jake understood publicity was weapon. That controlling narrative meant survival. The media had split predictably. Conservative outlets celebrating the rescue as proof that good men with guns stopped bad men. Liberal outlets condemning vigilante violence while quietly acknowledging the FBI's failure to act sooner. Social media had turned the Hells Angels into folk heroes and terrorists simultaneously, depending on which algorithm fed you content. Another text, this one from Diana. Memorial service for the 13 is set for Saturday. Private property, no press, brothers only, plus Shield sisters and families. Your presence requested, but not required. We understand if it's too risky. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Tommy McKenna, Luis Rodriguez, and 11 other warriors who'd ridden into Mexico and never come home. They deserve more than messages from motel rooms. They deserve their president standing at their memorial, honoring their sacrifice, making sure their deaths meant something beyond headlines and hashtags. He typed carefully, I'll be there. Tell Cole to arrange security. If feds want me, they can take me after I pay respects to my brothers. The service was held at the original Hells Angels clubhouse, the warehouse that had witnessed 40 years of brotherhood. Marcus arrived 2 hours early, disguised in borrowed pickup truck, wearing civilian clothes and ball cap pulled low. The parking lot was already filling, bikes lined up with military precision, each one representing a brother traveling from across the country to honor the fallen. Cole met him at the side entrance, gripping his shoulder. Good to see you, Wolf. Was worried you wouldn't make it. Marcus scanned the perimeter, noting the security Cole had arranged. Brothers positioned at every approach, watching for surveillance, ready to signal if law enforcement appeared. Couldn't miss this. How are the families? Cole's expression darkened. Tommy's daughter asked why her daddy had to die for someone else's grandkid. Didn't have a good answer for that. Marcus felt the words like physical blows. What did you tell her? Cole met his eyes, told her the truth, that her daddy was hero who saved innocent lives, that he chose to stand for something bigger than himself, that she should be proud. He paused. She's 9 years old, Wolf, not sure she understood. Marcus had no response because what could you say? That Tommy's sacrifice mattered? That his death served greater purpose? All true and all hollow comfort to a 9-year-old girl who'd never see her father again. This was the bill that came due, the cost of code written in blood and grief. The chapel, the clubhouse's inner sanctum where brothers gathered for ceremonies, had been transformed. 13 photographs lined the front wall, each brother frozen in better times. Tommy laughing at a club barbecue, Luis working on his bike, others Marcus had ridden with for decades. Beneath each photo sat their cut, folded with military precision, patches gleaming under soft light. Brothers filed in silently, filling rows of folding chairs. Shield sisters arrived next, Diana leading 20 women who owed their lives to the network these men had died protecting. Then came families, widows, children, parents who'd outlived their sons. The room held perhaps 200 people, every one of them bound by shared understanding of what had been lost and why. Jake found Marcus in the back row. You want to speak? Marcus shook his head. This isn't about me. Let the brothers who rode with them tell their stories. For 2 hours, men stood and shared memories. Cole spoke about Tommy's terrible jokes and his absolute reliability under fire. A prospect barely 20 years old, voice shaking, described how Luis had saved his life during the raid by taking a bullet meant for him. One by one, the 13 were remembered not as statistics or casualties, but as fathers, brothers, friends, warriors who'd chosen honor over safety. When the last story was told, Diana Cross stood and addressed the gathering. These men died protecting my network. They died so 23 women and children could live free. Some of you are wondering if that trade was worth it. 13 lives for 23. I can't answer that for you, Baum, but I can tell you this. Every woman we saved will tell her story, will raise her children, will teach them that when the world is cruel, some men stand in the gap. That's the legacy your brothers bought with their blood. She gestured to a woman in the front row, Yesenia, who Marcus recognized from briefings, one of the women rescued from the trafficking ring. Yesenia, would you like to speak? The young woman stood, hands shaking but voice steady. I don't know most of you. I'm not family, not biker, not part of your world. But 6 months ago, when my ex-boyfriend found me and tried to kill me, Shield Sisters saved my life. When the cartel grabbed me back, your brothers saved me again. Luis Rodriguez died getting me out of that compound. He didn't know me, didn't owe me anything. He just knew I needed help, and he gave everything. Tears streamed down her face. I'm 23 years old. I'm alive because your brother died. I'm going to college in the fall. I'm going to be a social worker. I'm going to save other women the way I was saved. And every life I touch, every person I help, that's Luis's legacy continuing. That's Tommy's sacrifice rippling forward. Please don't think they died for nothing. They died so I could live, and I'm going to make that life count. The room held heavy silence, broken only by crying. Marcus felt tears on his own face, something that would have embarrassed him years ago, but now felt appropriate, necessary, the only honest response to grief this profound. These men had been more than brothers. They'd been his sons, his responsibility, his family. Their deaths sat on his shoulders alongside Emma's, alongside every other person he had failed to protect. After the service, as people filtered out toward the reception, Marcus slipped into the chapel alone. He stood before the 13 photographs, studying each face, remembering specific moments with each man. Tommy teaching him to use encrypted communications, Luis showing him how to hack police databases. Others whose names were carved into his memory alongside Rodriguez and Martinez and all the ghosts from Vietnam. Derek Nash's photograph hung slightly apart from the others, not excluded but separate, reflecting his complicated legacy. He died saving Rachel, had redeemed himself in final moments, but his betrayal had set events in motion that killed 12 other brothers. The club had argued for days about whether to honor him alongside the others. Finally, Cole had made the call. Derek died a brother, protecting innocence, earning back his patch in blood. That was enough. Marcus approached Derek's phone and spoke quietly. You broke my heart, kid. Betrayed everything we built. But you fixed it at the end. Found yourself when it mattered most. Emma would have forgiven you. I do forgive you. Rest easy. Brother? He turned to leave and found Jake standing in the doorway, face serious. Wolf, we need to talk about the club's future. They walked outside to where Jake's Sportster waited. The younger man pulled 2 beers from his saddlebag and handed one to Marcus. Cole's officially taking over as president. We held the vote last week, unanimous. He's good leader, steady. The club will survive under him. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. He's the right choice. What about you? Jake's expression tightened. That's what I need to discuss. The FBI offered me a deal, immunity for cooperation. They want detailed testimony about the raid, about cartel operations, about Wade's corruption. In exchange, I walk free, and the club avoids RICO charges. Marcus studied his former VP, reading the conflict in his body language. What did you tell them? Jake's voice carried frustration. That I needed to think about it, because testifying means betraying the code. We don't cooperate with law enforcement. We don't rat out brothers. We sure as hell don't turn state's evidence. But Wolf, he paused, struggling. If I don't cooperate, the entire club goes down. 70 brothers facing federal conspiracy charges, families destroyed, everything you built scattered to wind. Marcus drank his beer slowly, considering the impossible choice Jake faced. What does your gut say? Jake looked at the clubhouse, at the brothers gathered outside sharing stories and grief. My gut says the code matters, but my head says protecting the brotherhood means making hard choices. If I can save 70 brothers by sacrificing my own honor, isn't that leadership? Marcus thought about all the impossible choices he'd made over the years, all the lines he'd crossed to protect family. Leadership is knowing when the code serves the brotherhood and when the brotherhood outgrows the code. The club was built to protect innocence and stand for justice when law fails. You testified against corrupt sheriff. You helped dismantle trafficking network. That's not betrayal, that's the mission. Jake absorbed this, then nodded slowly. I'm taking the deal. Testifying next month. After that, I'm done with the club. Can't be VP after turning state's witness. Even if it saves everyone else. Brothers will understand the math but won't forgive the method. Marcus gripped his shoulder. You're doing the right thing. Hard thing, but right. When it's done, come find me. Wherever I am, there's always place for you. Jake's eyes reddened. Where will you be? Marcus looked out at the desert, at the horizon that had always called him. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I can watch my grandson grow up from distance, somewhere I can finally rest. They finished their beers in comfortable silence, two warriors acknowledging the end of an era, the changing of guard, the price of survival measured in honor traded for pragmatism. When Jake finally left, Marcus remained, watching the sun set over the clubhouse one last time. His phone buzzed, text from Danny. Dad, I'm coming home. 3 days, can we meet? Somewhere safe, need to see you. Rachel and Ethan need to see you. Marcus's heart clenched. 6 weeks since Mexico, 6 weeks without seeing his grandson, 6 weeks of wondering if that moment in the compound, holding Ethan, hearing Guampa Wolf, would be the last clear memory he'd carry. The idea of seeing them again, of holding his grandson without gunfire and chaos, felt almost impossible. He arranged the meeting through Diana, who knew safe houses the government hadn't compromised. 3 days later, Marcus sat in a cabin in the Colorado mountains, waiting for his family to arrive. Snow fell softly outside, early autumn storm bringing unexpected beauty to the high country. He'd grown a beard to alter his appearance, cut his hair short, bought reading glasses he didn't need, small changes that might buy him a few more months before facial recognition algorithms caught up. The sound of tires on gravel announced their arrival. Marcus watched through the window as Danny climbed out of an unmarked SUV, scanning the perimeter with professional paranoia before opening the back door. Rachel emerged holding Ethan, who'd grown visibly in 6 weeks. Toddlers change fast, and Marcus had missed weeks of that growth. He opened the cabin door and stepped onto the porch, and for a moment, father and son just stared at each other across 10 yards of snow-covered ground. Then Danny closed the distance in 5 strides and pulled Marcus into fierce embrace. Danny's voice came out rough. Thank you for everything, for coming into hell for us, for being the man I've always known you were. Marcus held his son close, feeling the solid weight of him, the proof that despite everything Danny had survived, you'd have done the same for me. Danny pulled back, and Marcus saw tears cutting tracks down his face. I did do the same. That's why I was in Mexico at all, because you taught me that family comes first, always. Rachel approached more slowly, Ethan on her hip, and when she met Marcus's eyes, her expression carried complicated emotions. Gratitude, guilt, sorrow for the men who died saving her. She didn't speak, just stepped forward and let Marcus fold both her and Ethan into his arms. Ethan's small voice broke the moment. Guampa Wolf, you came. Marcus's composure finally shattered. He pulled his grandson close, feeling the boy's heartbeat against his chest, smelling baby shampoo and innocence and everything worth fighting for. I'll always come for you, little warrior. Always. They spent the afternoon in the cabin, Danny telling stories Marcus hadn't heard about Rachel's undercover work, about the trafficking network they documented, about the women whose testimony would put 50 cartel members away for life. Rachel talked about going back to FBI headquarters, about promotion waiting for her, about future missions targeting other networks. Ethan played with toys they'd brought, occasionally running to Marcus for hugs that the old man rationed like medicine. As evening approached and snow continued falling, Danny broached the difficult subject. Dad, the FBI wants to offer you a deal. Immunity in exchange for testimony about Wade's corruption in the cartel's operations in Arizona. You'd have to surrender, spend 6 months in custody while trials proceed, but afterward, you'd be free, clear record. Could come home. Marcus had expected this. What's the catch? Rachel answered. You'd have to testify against surviving brothers who participated in the raid. Identify them, confirm their involvement, help prosecution build cases. The FBI wants symbolic convictions, proof that even heroes face consequences for breaking laws. Marcus shook his head before she finished. Not happening. I'm not buying my freedom by selling out my brothers. Danny's voice carried frustration. Dad, you're 65 in the frame story. You've been running for 17 years in your own telling of this. When does it end? Marcus looked at his son, at the man he'd raised, and saw the same unyielding code reflected back. It ends when I die. Free man on my terms, not government's. The conversation died there because Danny knew his father too well to push. They spent another hour together, dinner, stories, Ethan falling asleep in Marcus's lap, while the old man sang half-remembered lullabies from when Danny was small. Then too soon it was time for them to leave. At the door, Danny handed Marcus an envelope. College fund for Ethan, already set up in his name. If something happens to us, he'll have education paid for. Thought you'd want to know. Marcus took the envelope, seeing the careful planning his son had done. You're a good father, better than I was. Danny shook his head. I learned from the best. You taught me everything that matters: honor, loyalty, sacrifice, standing for those who can't stand themselves. That's the legacy I'm passing to Ethan. Your legacy. They embraced one final time, and Marcus felt the weight of generations. His father's lessons passed to him, his lessons passed to Danny, Danny's lessons waiting for Ethan. Code transmitted not through words but example. Each generation choosing whether to uphold or abandon the standard. His family had chosen to uphold it. That was worth more than freedom. After they left, Marcus sat alone in the cabin watching snow fall and thinking about legacy. 13 brothers dead, 70 more scattered, some testifying, some in hiding, some trying to rebuild normal lives. Shield sisters still operating under Diana's leadership, saving women every week. Rachel back at FBI, hunting traffickers. Danny raising Ethan to understand justice meant more than laws. The raid had cost everything and won everything. That was the paradox of sacrifice. You traded present for future, comfort for meaning, safety for purpose. Marcus wouldn't change any of it. Given the same choices, he'd make them again. That's what code meant. Not doing the easy thing, but doing the right thing, regardless of cost. 2 months after the memorial service, Diana contacted Marcus about a ceremony the Shield sisters wanted to hold. Location was another safe house, this one in New Mexico, far from prying eyes. Purpose was honoring the women rescued from the trafficking ring and the warriors who'd freed them. Marcus almost declined. Too much exposure, too much risk. But Diana's message included one line that changed his mind. Sophie Chen is receiving special recognition. She'd like you there. He arrived at dusk, parking his motorcycle, new one, bought used, untraceable. Behind the house, inside, 40 people gathered. Shield sisters, survivors, a handful of brothers who'd made the trip. Sophie stood near the front, wearing civilian clothes but carrying herself with new confidence Marcus hadn't seen before. She'd transformed in the months since Derek's crisis, had stopped being victim and become warrior. Diana called the room to order. We're gathered tonight to honor courage, not the dramatic kind that makes headlines, but the quiet kind that builds new lives from ashes. The women rescued from the compound are here, 23 souls who survived hell and chose to keep surviving. Each of them is testament to why our network matters. She gestured to the survivors, and one by one they stood to share their stories. Yesenia talked about enrolling in community college. Maria described finding job as a teacher's aide. Each story was small miracle, proof that rescue was just beginning, that real work came in therapy sessions and court testimonies and quiet moments choosing hope over despair. When the last story was told, Diana pulled white vest from a bag, soft leather, red stitching, the word untouchable embroidered across the back. This vest is given to women who go beyond surviving, who transform their trauma into purpose, who protect others the way they were protected. Only 7 women in our network's history have earned this. She looked at Sophie. Sophie Chen, 3 years ago, we pulled you from a burning motel. You were broken, terrified, ready to give up. But you rebuilt yourself, opened a business, became safe harbor for others running from danger. When Derek Nash took Rachel Hayes hostage in your diner, you didn't freeze or flee. You stood in the gap. You created the opening that saved lives. Sophie approached, and Marcus saw tears streaming down her face. Diana helped her into the vest, adjusting the fit. As long as you wear this, you're under our protection. Anyone who threatens you faces the full weight of the Shield Sisters network and every brother in the Hells Angels. You're untouchable not because you're fragile, but because you're precious, because you're warrior, because you're family. The room erupted in applause. Brothers who'd made the trip stood in respect. Survivors who understood the weight of that vest surrounded Sophie, welcoming her into the smallest, most elite sorority imaginable. Marcus waited until the celebration died down before approaching Sophie. She saw him and smiled, complicated expression mixing gratitude and sorrow. "Wolf, I'm glad you came." He studied the vest, remembering the day years ago when Diana had explained the tradition. "You earned this 10 times over. Derek's situation, the hostage crisis, everything after. You kept your head, saved lives." Sophie's smile faded. Derek saved lives at the end. He wasn't monster, was he? Just broken man who found himself again. Marcus thought about Derek's final moments, the choice to throw himself between Rachel and the bullet. He was both, broken and heroic, traitor and brother. That's the hardest truth. People aren't one thing. They're all their choices, good and bad, stacked up until the final moment. Sophie touched the vest. "I want to do more, not just own a diner that happens to be a safe place. I want to actively recruit, actively save, actively build the network. Diana's offered me position as co-director. I'm taking it." Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. "You'll be good at it. You understand the fear because you lived it. You understand the hope because you found it." That combination is rare. They talked longer about the network's expansion plans, about the brothers still in hiding, about the future of vigilante justice in America where the system increasingly failed those it was designed to protect. When Marcus finally said goodbye, Sophie hugged him with surprising strength. "Thank you for building something that mattered, for showing broken people we can become protectors." Marcus held her briefly. "You did the hard part. You chose to heal instead of hate. That's what separates survivors from victims." He left the ceremony feeling lighter somehow. Despite everything, the network would continue. Women would be saved. The code would be passed to next generation of warriors. His brothers hadn't died for nothing. They died to plant seeds that were already bearing fruit. 6 months after Mexico, Cole called with news. "Wolf, Wade flipped. Cut a deal testifying against the entire cartel network. Names, dates, financial records, everything. In exchange, he gets 20 years instead of life." Brothers are furious, but his testimony is bringing down the whole organization. Marcus absorbed this from another motel room in another forgotten town. "How many convictions?" Cole's voice carried satisfaction. 43 so far, more coming. Human trafficking ring is dismantled. Drug routes are disrupted. Shield Sisters safe houses are secure because the people who knew their locations are all in prison. It's over, Wolf. We won. Marcus wasn't sure "won" was the right word for situation that left 13 brothers dead and their president in permanent exile, but he understood what Cole meant. The mission had succeeded. Evil had been punished. Innocents were safer. That was as close to victory as warriors got in messy reality where heroes paid prices that never appeared in stories. Jake took the FBI deal and testified for 3 weeks, providing detail that convicted 7 more corrupt officials and 14 cartel members. The media portrayed him as hero and traitor simultaneously, depending on political alignment. The club officially expelled him for cooperating with the law enforcement, but privately brothers understood the sacrifice he'd made. He'd traded his honor for their freedom. Classic warrior's bargain that left everyone alive but nothing clean. Danny received commendation from FBI director and was promoted to assistant special agent in charge, youngest person to hold that position. Rachel returned to undercover work, this time targeting sex trafficking in Eastern Europe. Ethan grew bigger, talking in full sentences. Learning to ride tricycle his grandfather would never see him ride. 13 families received death benefits from insurance policies the club maintained for exactly these situations. Tommy's daughter got college fund that would cover any university she chose. Luis's parents received monthly stipend that let them retire comfortably. The club took care of its own, even in death, especially in death. Marcus moved every month, working cash jobs, living small, avoiding cameras and questions. He grew old alone in motels and rented rooms, watching his grandson grow via photos Danny sent through encrypted channels. It was prison without walls, exile without foreign soil, the price of keeping his word and protecting his family. 17 years later, on his 65th birthday, Marcus sat on his ranch in New Mexico, property purchased through shell companies, isolated enough that visitors were obvious miles before arrival. The club had negotiated unofficial amnesty with current FBI administration. As long as Marcus stayed out of the spotlight, avoided new crimes, and didn't publicly embarrass the government, they'd pretend not to know where he was. Cold War dicton applied to domestic fugitive. Ethan, now 18, fresh from signing Marine Corps enlistment papers, sat beside him on the porch asking the question that started this story. "Grandpa, why do they call you the last wolf?" And Marcus began telling the tale, the whole truth without embellishment, because his grandson deserved to understand the cost of code, deserved to know that heroism meant sacrifice, that brotherhood meant dying together, that family meant riding into hell because the alternative was living without honor. When the story ended with the convoy disappearing into the desert night, Ethan sat silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, voice carrying the same steel Marcus heard in his own. "You said you were 48 during the raid. You're 65 now. That's 17 years running. When does it end?" Marcus looked at his grandson. So much of Danny in his face, so much of Kate in his eyes, so much potential waiting to unfold. "It ended the day you were born. Everything after has been bonus time. Years I bought by choosing you over comfort. I'd do it again tomorrow." Ethan absorbed this then. "The Marines want to send me to officer candidate school after boot camp, following Dad's path. But I've been thinking, maybe I should work with Shield Sisters instead, help protect women who can't protect themselves. Continue your legacy." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Your legacy is your choice, Marine, Shield Sisters, or something else entirely. Whatever you pick, make it mean something. Don't waste the life 13 brothers died protecting." Ethan nodded slowly. "Tell me about them." "The 13. I know names, but who were they really?" So Marcus told more stories as the sun set over New Mexico desert, painting sky the color of blood and hope. Told about Tommy's terrible jokes and his absolute reliability. About Luis's genius with technology and his quiet courage. About 11 others who'd ridden to Mexico and never returned. Each one warrior in fullest sense. Each one brother in truest meaning. When darkness finally fell and stars emerged in impossible profusion, Ethan spoke one more time. "Grandpa, what makes a man?" Marcus thought about the question, the same one he'd asked himself 1,000 times, the central puzzle of existence that every generation had to solve for themselves. Finally, he answered, "A man is the sum of his choices when the stakes are highest, not the choices he makes when it's easy or safe, but the choices he makes when everything costs something. Honor over comfort, family over self, standing in the gap even when the gap means death." He paused, looking at his grandson's face in starlight. "You're going to face those choices, Ethan. In the Marines, in life, in quiet moments when no one's watching. What you choose defines what you become. Choose carefully, choose honorably. Choose with full understanding that some prices are worth paying. Ethan met his eyes with 18-year-old certainty. You taught me by example. That's the best lesson any grandfather can give. They sat together in comfortable silence, 3 generations of warriors, one past, one present, one future, connected by code that transcended blood. Marcus thought about Kate, about Emma, about 13 brothers whose photographs hung in the clubhouse, about 70 more who'd scattered to win but still carried the patch in their hearts. The last wolf. They called him that not because he was the final member of his generation, but because he'd been the last to believe the old code still mattered in modern world. The last to think honor trumped law. That family justified any sacrifice. That some fights were worth losing everything to win. But sitting here with his grandson, seeing the future written in young man's determined expression, Marcus understood he wasn't the last after all. The code continued because warriors chose to carry it forward. Derek had chosen it in his final seconds. Jake had chosen it by sacrificing honor for brotherhood's survival. Danny chose it every day hunting traffickers. And now Ethan was choosing it, preparing to join the long line of men who stood in gaps others refused to acknowledge. Marcus's phone buzzed. Text from Jake, who'd rebuilt his life as security consultant and stayed in touch despite official expulsion. Wolf, Cole died today, heart attack. Quick, no suffering. Funeral next week. You should come. Last time the brotherhood gathers. Marcus stared at the message, feeling weight of time crushing down. Cole Washington, his sergeant-at-arms for 20 years, the brother who'd stood beside him through every battle. Gone at 70, lived longer than most warriors had any right to expect. The last link to Vietnam generation that built the modern club. He showed the text to Ethan. I need to go to this. Want to come with me? Ethan nodded without hesitation. I'd be honored. The funeral drew 300 people, brothers from a dozen chapters, shield sisters from across the Southwest, families Cole had protected over 40 years of service. They gathered at the original clubhouse, the warehouse that had witnessed so much history, and Marcus walked through front door for first time in 17 years. The chapel looked different, new photographs on the walls, younger faces among the older, but the fundamental spirit remained. Brothers wearing cuts with patches Marcus didn't recognize. New generation carrying old code. They parted as he entered, creating path to the front where Cole's cut lay draped over a closed casket. Jake approached, older now, gray in his beard, but still carrying himself like warrior. Wolf, good to see you, old man. They embraced, and Marcus felt decades compress into a single moment. You look good. Life's treating you well? Jake smiled. Married now, 2 kids, working private security, protecting executives from the kind of people we used to fight. It's good life, Wolf, boring but good. Marcus scanned the room, recognizing some faces, missing others. How many of the original 70 are left? Jake's expression darkened. 23 still alive, 8 in prison serving unrelated sentences, 15 just gone, dropped off grid, changed identities, chose different lives. The brotherhood fractured after Mexico, never fully recovered. Marcus had known this intellectually, but hearing it stated plainly hurt deeper than expected. What about the new generation? Jake gestured at younger brothers lining the walls. They're good men, keep the code as best they can. But Wolf, the world's different now. Government surveillance, facial recognition, social media, being outlaw requires different skills than we had. These kids are hackers and lawyers as much as fighters. The service began with traditional biker funeral, brothers standing to tell stories, sharing memories that ranged from hilarious to heartbreaking. Cole had lived fully, had protected fiercely, had died with honor intact. They played his favorite songs, served his favorite whiskey, promised to look after his family the way he'd looked after theirs. When the formal service ended, the brothers formed up for final ride. 200 bikes escorting Cole's casket to cemetery on the edge of town. Marcus mounted his bike, newer model, maintained with same precision he'd learned 50 years ago, and took his place at the front of the formation beside Jake. They rode through desert sunset, engines roaring in synchronization. a river of chrome and leather paying final respects to fallen warrior. Marcus felt every mile in his bones. 65 years of hard living, of violence survived and brothers buried, of choices that cost everything and bought just enough. This was his last ride with the Brotherhood. After today, he'd return to his ranch and let younger generation carry forward. At the cemetery, as they lowered Cole into ground beside 24 other brothers, Marcus stepped forward to deliver final words. Cole Washington was my brother for 40 years. He stood beside me in battles I should have lost. He led men I should have failed. He protected family I couldn't always protect. He kept the code when keeping it meant sacrifice. His voice carried across assembled warriors. I'm old now, past my time, but I see you. He gestured at younger brothers. I see you carrying forward what we built. I see you standing in gaps when law fails. I see you protecting innocents who have nowhere else to turn. That's Cole's legacy. That's our legacy. Keep it alive. He placed his hand on the casket. Rest easy, brother. Emma's waiting for you. Tell her we kept the promise. Tell her Shield Sisters is still saving women. Tell her the wolves still hunt. They buried Cole as sunset, and Marcus stood beside the grave long after others left, saying private goodbye to last friend from Vietnam generation. He thought about Rodriguez, dead 57 years in Quezon. Thought about Kate, gone 14 years to cancer. Thought about Emma, dead 27 years to domestic violence. Thought about Tommy and Luis and 11 others buried in the club cemetery after Mexico. So many ghosts, so much weight. And yet, standing here in dying light, Marcus felt peace. He'd kept his promises, protected his family, built something that outlasted him. The code would continue because men like Ethan chose to carry it. That was enough. Ethan approached, placing hand on Marcus's shoulder. Grandpa, they're waiting for us at the clubhouse. Final gathering. Marcus nodded and followed his grandson back to the bikes. The ride to the clubhouse took 20 minutes, and when they arrived, the parking lot was full. Inside, the Brotherhood had gathered for wake, stories and whiskey, and the particular brand of grief warriors shared when one of their own died with honor. Diana Cross found Marcus in the chapel, staring at photographs of fallen brothers. Wolf, it's been too long. He turned and saw she'd aged gracefully, 70 now, gray-haired but still carrying fierce energy that made her force of nature. Diana, how's the Shield? She smiled. Thriving. Sophie's co-director now. We've expanded to 15 states, 60 safe houses, 200 volunteers. Last year alone, we moved 340 women and children. The mission continues. Marcus felt pride swell. Emma would be proud. Diana's expression softened. Emma would be proud of you, Wolf, of everything you built, everyone you saved, the price you paid to protect innocence. Her death wasn't in vain. They talked for an hour about the women rescued, the lives rebuilt, the network that had grown from Marcus's grief into national movement. Shield Sisters had inspired copycat organizations across the country, had changed how law enforcement approached domestic violence, had saved thousands of lives. It was a legacy bigger than Marcus had imagined when he started. As the gathering wound down and brothers began departing, Jake called for attention. Before everyone leaves, there's one more thing. The club voted unanimously. Wolf, come up here. Marcus approached reluctantly, and Jake pulled out package wrapped in black leather. Marcus Donovan, you founded this chapter 40 years ago. Built it on principles that matter. Honor, loyalty, protection of innocence. You led us through battles no one else could win. You sacrificed everything for brotherhood. Jake unwrapped the package, revealing leather cut with single patch on the back. Founder in gold letters. The Hells Angels logo modified with shield symbol. You can't be president. You're fugitive. Can't hold official position. But you can be what you've always been. Founding father of everything we stand for. This cut is yours. Wear it with honor. Marcus took the cut, feeling weight of recognition, of respect earned through decades of service. He pulled it on slowly, and the brotherhood erupted in applause. 70 men, 100 women, families and friends, all standing for old warrior who'd given everything to build something worth dying for. Ethan approached carrying beer. To Grandpa Wolf, founder, warrior, legend. They raised glasses, and Marcus felt tears he didn't bother hiding. This was goodbye to the active brotherhood, to the life he'd known, to the warrior he'd been. But it was also hello to whatever came next. Grandfather, mentor, living reminder of code written in blood and maintained in sacrifice. The party continued into night, and Marcus slipped away quietly, Ethan following. They rode back to the ranch in darkness, two generations of warriors connected by code and blood. When they arrived, Marcus parked his bike for the last time and stood staring at it in moonlight. Ethan's voice came quiet. "You going to ride anymore?" Marcus shook his head. That was the last ride, Cole's funeral, final gathering with the brotherhood. Everything after is just waiting. Ethan absorbed this. Waiting for what? Marcus met his grandson's eyes. For you to carry it forward. For your generation to prove the code still matters. For proof that 13 brothers didn't die for nothing. Ethan straightened, unconsciously coming to attention. I'll make you proud, Grandpa. I promise. Marcus gripped his shoulder. You already have, son. Just by being here. Just by choosing honor over easy. Just by asking why they call me the last wolf and actually listening to the answer. They stood together in comfortable silence, and Marcus thought about the long, strange road from Quezon to this moment. 57 years of war and peace, blood and brotherhood, sacrifice and survival. He'd made mistakes, many mistakes, had failed people he loved, had gotten good men killed, but he'd also built something meaningful, protected countless innocents, proved that code could exist even in world designed to crush it. The last wolf, not because he was the final warrior, but because he'd been last to believe the old ways still worked. But standing here with Ethan, seeing future in his grandson's determined face, Marcus understood the story didn't end with him. It continued because each generation chose to carry code forward or let it die. Ethan had chosen to carry it. That was enough. Marcus Donovan, 65 years old, fugitive and legend, grandfather and warrior, walked into his ranch house and closed the door on the life he'd lived. The brotherhood would continue without him. Shield sisters would save more women. The code would survive in the hearts of men and women who chose meaning, greater comfort. His war was over. Finally, truly over. And he'd won not by surviving, survivors were everywhere, but by building legacy worth more than survival. That was victory, the only kind that mattered. Leaving the world better than you found it. Protecting those who needed protection. Standing in the gap until younger men could take your place. Marcus sat in his chair on the porch, Ethan beside him, and watched stars emerge over New Mexico desert. Somewhere out there, Rachel was hunting traffickers. Danny was leading agents into danger. Sophie was saving women. Jake was rebuilding his life. 70 brothers wore patches Marcus had helped design. Thousands of women lived free because of network he'd founded. That was legacy. That was meaning. That was purpose bigger than any individual life. The last wolf had found his peace.